Chapter 9:18. When he left the Tai Yuan Heaven sect, Elder Tsang Xian had given him 3 azure feather shields. One could defend against king-ranked attacks, while the other could defend against emperor-ranked attacks. Qinzong had already used them, and the remaining third could defend against attacks from third-stage, heavenly profound realm experts. The power of the 7-star mysterious spirit hand was astounding, especially when it was fully deployed by a mid-7th level Earth Spirit Realm genius. It directly suppressed Qinzong. Not only did the frightening power press in from all directions, but the power of the Earth veins was also driven to bear down from below. This kind of pressure made it impossible for Qinzong to evade. Take it head-on. Was it the power of the 3rd Azure Feather Shield? Using the 3rd Azure Feather Shield to defend against an attack from a 7th level Earth Spirit Realm expert was like using a sledgehammer to crack a nut. Therefore, Qinzong didn't plan to use the 3rd Azure Feather Shield, but he wouldn't sit and wait for death either. Even though his body was suppressed, as if it was pressed down by an invisible mountain, and he couldn't move, his spirit sense wasn't affected much. In his sea of consciousness, an extremely condensed spirit sense sword broke through the air and pierced into a corner of his sea of consciousness. There was a small pagoda there. The small pagoda was pale gold in color, and it emitted a faint halo of light. It gave off a vast and mighty aura. This pagoda was called the Heaven Ascension Pagoda. This small pagoda was obtained by Qinzong on Chaotian Island. It was left behind by Emperor Li Tian before he left, and he said that he would leave it for the Fated One. Qinzong was the fated person of 1,000 years. However, after the Heaven Ascension Pagoda entered his sea of consciousness, it quieted down. Qinzong had to refine it first. This process was very slow, and it would occupy part of his spirit sense at all times. It wasn't easy to refine it, but he still couldn't use it because his cultivation wasn't strong enough. Only when he reached the Earth Spirit Realm would he be qualified to use the Heaven Ascension Pagoda. Qinzong was currently at the early 3rd level of the Earth Spirit Realm. If one were to compare the purity and density of his Earth veins' spirit energy, he wouldn't be the slightest bit inferior to an ordinary early 4th level Earth Spirit Realm practitioner. In fact, he might even be superior. Naturally, he would be able to utilize the power of the tower. However, this was the first time Qinzong used the Heaven Ascension Pagoda's power in a battle. He had only tried it a little in the past. The reason why he didn't use the Heaven Ascension Pagoda, so he didn't use it casually, was because it consumed a large amount of his energy. Now, he had no choice but to use it. This was also the reason why Qinzong dared to enter the 9th Spirit Gold Mine despite knowing that there were others. The sword of spiritual sense pierced into the tiny Tower of Ascension in an instant. Immediately, the Tower of Ascension trembled, and golden light burst forth. It spread out like a scorching sun, filling Qinzong's sea of knowledge. Then, it spread out from his sea of knowledge like a lightning tide, sweeping through every inch of Qinzong's body. The power in Qinzong's body surged and was swept away by the golden light from the Heaven Ascension Pagoda. Like a receding tide, it quickly surged toward the Heaven Ascension Pagoda in his knowledge sea. The Heaven Ascension Pagoda was like a whale sucking in water, absorbing all the power in Qinzong's body at an astonishing speed. Under normal circumstances, spiritual sense existed in the sea of consciousness. Spiritual force and vital force could not enter because they were not of the same origin. If one rashly tried to infuse spiritual power or physical strength into the sea of consciousness, there would only be one result. The sea of consciousness would be damaged or even shattered, and the consequences would be extremely miserable. However, the Tower of Ascension could do this. It could directly devour Qinzong's earth vein spiritual power and pure yang qi without affecting his sea of consciousness at all. After all of his power had been absorbed by the Tower of Ascension, an unprecedented emptiness spread throughout his body. Qinzong involuntarily felt an extremely strong sense of emptiness. He had felt this kind of emptiness several times before when he tried to activate the power of the Tower of Ascension. Even so, Qinzong still could not adapt to it. Fortunately, this feeling of emptiness was very brief. It was so brief that Qinzong did not feel it clearly. With a boom, like thunder in the void, as if the sky was being torn apart, a mighty and unparalleled power suddenly surged out of the Tower of Ascension. Like a flood breaking through a dam, it wantonly attacked Chenzong's limbs and bones. This power was vast and mighty. It was infinitely high, as if it did not belong to the human world. It was as if it came from beyond the heavens. It was incomparably profound and mysterious. Its momentum was unparalleled, and its power was unparalleled. Chenzong felt that his body was constantly being attacked. It hurt faintly, as if it was being torn apart. This was the power of the Tower of Ascension. It did not have a name, but Chenzong named it the power of ascension to heaven. The golden power of ascending to the heavens permeated every part of Chenzong's body. As it fused into his body, it formed a layer of protective membrane on his skin. At the same time, it wandered through his body recklessly, filling Chenzong with great power. Strong, very strong. It was incomparably tyrannical. The great power made Chenzong's aura soar and brought him unparalleled confidence. The power of ascension to heaven continued to surge out of the Tower of Ascension and into Chenzong's body, causing Chenzong's aura to rise continuously. As his aura rose, so did his strength. The pressure on Chenzong's body also increased. Stop! With a single thought, the power of ascension to heaven also stopped surging. If Chenzong didn't stop, the power of ascension to heaven would continue to surge out. As for how much power of ascension to heaven would emerge in the end, Chenzong didn't know. In his previous attempts, the more power of ascension to heaven that emerged, the greater the pressure on his body. Towards the end, Chenzong's body wouldn't be able to withstand the pressure and would be damaged from the inside. It might even explode. Once he exploded, he would naturally die. Chenzong didn't want to die in such a way. Therefore, after several attempts, Chenzong found a suitable time, and now was the time. The surging power of ascension to heaven just happened to be within the tolerance range of his body. It wouldn't cause any obvious burden and would greatly increase his strength. My strength should be at the 7th level of the Earth's spirit realm now, Chenzong thought to himself. In terms of cultivation level and martial arts attainments, Chenzong wasn't inferior to his opponent. The only difference was in strength. Now, the power of ascension to heaven had made up for the difference in strength. Brandishing the sword, the golden power of ascension to heaven surged into the heavenly will sword and slashed out a ray of golden sword light. Heavenly Scar. A sword pierced through the air. The power of this sword was unparalleled as it instantly sliced through the pressure of the 7-star mysterious spirit hand and slashed towards the enormous palm, sparkling with 7 points of starlight. Clash! The unstoppable palm suddenly paused and was split apart by the golden sword light. The remaining momentum didn't dissipate as it tore through the air and charged towards the 7th level Earth Spirit Realm Cultivator. Impossible! The 7th level Earth Spirit Realm Cultivator immediately roared out in shock. He'd clearly been about to kill his opponent with a single blow, but something like this had happened. His opponent's strength had increased by many times, and he could even deploy the 7-star Mysterious Spirit Hand with his full strength. 7-star Mysterious Spirit Hand. Life Reap. The 7-star Mysterious Spirit Hand was a famous technique within the 9-star Sky sect. It was at the top of the Earth's spirit realm, and its offensive power was extremely strong. Each move was stronger than the last. The first move was body-shattering, which had been split apart by Chenzong's sword. The 7th level Earth Spirit Realm Cultivator immediately deployed the second move, Life Reap. Specks of starlight lit up one after another until a total of 7 points of starlight were scattered in the air. The surroundings were plunged into darkness, and only the 7 points of starlight were incomparably dazzling. Immediately after, the veins outlined themselves and formed a slender palm. The index finger of the palm stretched out, and the 7 points of starlight were distributed on the finger, becoming more and more dazzling. The power was transmitted, and the finger immediately pointed forward. The air was repelled by the finger, and the air caved in like a thin membrane. An exceedingly terrifying power of destruction locked down Chenzong's entire body. The pressure that this move brought to him was much greater than the previous one. If it had been before, Chenzong probably wouldn't even have been able to move a finger. But now, he wasn't afraid at all. The power of ascension to heaven surged once again, and the power passed through the sword as it stabbed out. A violent explosion rang out as if the earth was quaking and the mountains were shaking. The terrifying sword transformed into a thumb-sized golden spark that pierced through the sky. It carried an unparalleled might as it ferociously shot towards that finger. The golden spark collided with the finger and both paused. In the next breath, the finger was covered with cracks, and the 7 points of starlight dimmed and then extinguished. The finger crumbled inch by inch, and the entire palm crumbled and dissipated. The spark dimmed as well, but it still flew towards the 7th-level Earth Spirit Realm cultivator of the 9-star Sky Sect. Chunzong stabbed out a second time, as fast as a spark, and as fast as it could be. The third sword strike was still as urgent as a spark. The fourth sword strike was still as urgent as a spark. One strike after another, each strike flying at an extremely terrifying speed. The 10th strike, Starfire Sky Strike. The first 2 moves of the 7 Stars' mysterious spirit hand were broken one after another. Before he could perform the third move, Chunzong's sword kept stabbing towards him. It looked like he had stabbed out 8 times at the same time, coming from all directions. Each strike carried a terrifying power that made him feel threatened, extremely threatened. He resisted 8 strikes, but couldn't block the 9th strike, because that strike had gathered all of Chunzong's power of ascension and was extremely powerful. I don't want to die. He looked down at his chest with a face full of shock. There was a hole there about the size of fist. The edges were incomparably smooth, and his heart was nowhere to be seen. A terrifying power wreaked havoc through his body from the hole, extinguishing all signs of life. Completely devoid of life, the 7th-level Earth Spirit Realm disciple fell backwards. Chunzong's movements were incomparably swift as he took off the other's gloves. This was a top mid-rank spirit weapon, and its value was even higher than ordinary mid-rank spirit weapons. As for the inner armor on the other's body, it had already been damaged. Fang Zong had actually used a void ring instead of a mustard seed bag. The value of a void ring couldn't be compared to a mustard seed bag. With a wave of his hand, sword aura swept out, dismembering the opponent's body in an instant to prevent evil thoughts from taking over his body or turning him into an evil corpse. Immediately, the golden light on his body receded like a receding tide and returned to the Tower of Ascension. A sense of emptiness appeared again. Then, 3 forces emerged from the Tower of Ascension. One was spiritual sense, one was physical strength, and the last was the spiritual power of the earth vein. Only about 2/3 of it remained. Chunzong didn't dare to waste any time. He hurriedly took out various pills and swallowed them to replenish his consumed energy. Chapter 919. Stiff Neck, what kind of joke is this? Chunzong found 7 spirit gold, ores of different sizes in the 9-star Sky Sect's 7th-level Earth Spirit Realm Cultivator's spatial ring, and couldn't help but feel a bit happy. Continuing along the passageway, Chunzong soon felt traces of fluctuations in the air, coming from afar. Someone's fighting. A light flashed in Chunzong's eyes, but he didn't hesitate and continued forward. It was normal for a battle to occur in this place, and with his background, Chunzong naturally had the confidence to face a strong opponent. He didn't fear or hesitate. As he moved forward, Chunzong felt the aura become more and more obvious, and the fluctuations in the air became more and more intense. Amidst the constant fluctuations, Chunzong felt that the passageway seemed to be shaking. Actually, the passageway wasn't shaking, but the air was shaking. However, the magnitude of the shaking was so great that it gave Chunzong the illusion that the passageway was shaking as well. It was enough to show the intensity of the battle and the strength of the combatants, which made Chunzong curious. At least the strength of the 8th-level Earth Spirit Realm. Chunzong said to himself. Gradually, in addition to the increasingly powerful fluctuations of aura, Chunzong also heard an ear-piercing sound. 3 people are fighting. It should be 2 against 1. Chunzong's hearing was very sharp, and he was able to make a judgment based on the sound. Moreover, the momentum and fluctuations of aura let Chunzong know that the 3 combatants were all at the 9th level of the Earth Spirit Realm and were very strong. There was only one passageway, and Chunzong could either continue forward or retreat. Thus, he chose to continue forward. After a few thousand meters, Chunzong saw an enormous cavern. There were no other forks in the cavern, and it was obviously the end. There was a battle going on in the enormous cavern. Just as he had judged from the sounds earlier, there were 3 people fighting, 2 against 1. No, it should be said that the 2 sides of the battle were 2 cultivators and an evil corpse. The aura fluctuations emitted by the 2 cultivators were extremely tyrannical. One of them was vast and deep, carrying with it an indescribable coldness, as if it originated from the dark starry sky. It was bone-chilling. Specks of starlight circled around this person. There were a total of 9 specks of starlight, as if 9 stars were shining with dazzling light. As they rotated, it was as if they were flying stars chasing after the moon, mysterious and profound. This kind of aura allowed Chunzong to know the other's identity. He was an Earth Spirit Realm expert from the 9 Star Sky sect. The other person was tall and stalwart. His shoulders were wide and thick, as if he could carry a mountain. The aura around him was even more domineering and shocking to the extreme. Powerful sounds constantly surged out from his body, like the water of a great river rippling endlessly, surging like a raging tide, revealing the vigorous and majestic strength of this person. Every move of this stalwart figure carried with it a tremendous amount of power that could topple mountains and overturn seas. It was violent and overbearing, as if every strike could destroy a mountain and nothing could stop it. Chunzong recognized him. He was one of the Earth Spirit Realm experts from the Skyscraper Association. The aura fluctuations of these 2 people allowed Chunzong to confirm that they were 9th-level Earth Spirit Realm experts. Moreover, they weren't ordinary 9th-level Earth Spirit Realm experts, but the kind that stood at the peak of the 9th-level Earth Spirit Realm. Of course, they weren't Emperor Realm experts yet. If they were Emperor Realm experts, they wouldn't be able to enter the Spirit Gold Secret Realm at all. Although they weren't Emperor Realm experts, they were already at the peak of the Earth Spirit Realm. The aura they carried with them when they attacked made Chunzong's expression solemn and fearful. If he were to be affected by them, he would most likely be killed. However, what made Chunzong even more surprised was that these 2 people from different factions didn't fight against each other. Instead, they teamed up to fight against a strong enemy. Their strength also shocked Chunzong. It was an evil corpse, but it was very different from the evil corpses he had encountered before. Although this evil corpse's skin was also greenish-gray and its body looked slightly skinny, it was fuller than the evil corpses he had seen before. Although its eyes were cold and bloodthirsty, they weren't as rigid as before. Instead, they were more lively. If it weren't for the extremely dense evil aura and the strong evil intent that was like black smoke, people might even think that it was a special person. Another thing that made Chunzong even more surprised was that this evil corpse was holding a rusty long sword in its right hand. An evil corpse that knew how to use weapons. An evil corpse that knew how to use swords. In addition, Chunzong could also see that although this evil corpse's movements were a bit stiff and the swords it used weren't profound or exquisite, but the charm in it couldn't be faked. He was sure that this evil corpse must have been an expert swordsman when he was alive. He must have had amazing achievements in the way of the sword. The way of the sword had long been imprinted in his bones and had become an instinct of his body. Chunzong stopped and stood in a corner of the cave to avoid being affected by the battle and to be able to watch the battle clearly. No matter if it was the 9th-level Earth Spirit Realm expert of the 9 Star Sky sect or the Skyscraper Society, not only did they possess unparalleled strength, their attainments in martial Tao were unfathomable, and their battle experience was incomparably abundant. Watching them in action would be of great benefit to him. The other thing was that although the evil corpse's swords looked simple, the meaning contained within them wasn't simple at all. As he watched, Chunzong was certain that this evil corpse's attainments in the way of the sword were absolutely above his own when he was alive. Even when facing 2 peak Earth Spirit Realm experts, the evil corpse hadn't been killed. It seemed to be at a disadvantage, but its body was incomparably strong as it forcefully withstood the attacks of the 2. Even if it was injured, its strength wouldn't be affected in the slightest. With 2 bangs, the evil corpse forcefully withstood the ferocious attacks of the 2. The rusty long sword in its hand suddenly slashed out, and the blade suddenly disappeared into the air. It couldn't be seen or touched, and even its aura was concealed in an instant. The sudden slash of the sword was completely unexpected and startled the expert of the Skyscraper Society. He only had time to strengthen his defense, but the defense was cut open as if it didn't exist. Even the inner armor of a mid-rank spirit weapon couldn't withstand the sharpness of the sword. As the long sword slashed through, the stalwart figure quickly retreated, but his tough skin was still cut open. He could feel a little of his blood being taken away. That little bit of blood was nothing compared to the blood in his body. It was probably only about 1% of his blood. However, as the 1% of his blood was taken away and merged with the rusty longsword, the rust gradually melted away and traces of blood condensed on the blade of the sword. In an instant, the sword seemed to have come to life, which made Qinzong's hair stand on end. It seemed that the sword had a unique life, and the bloodlines on it were just like the veins of a human. An even more evil aura suddenly spread out from the longsword that was covered with bloodlines, startling Qinzong outside of the cave. The faces of the two experts also greatly changed. 9 Stars' mysterious spirit hand. Body shattering. As the expert of the 9-star sky sect waved his hand, the 9 stars surrounding his body shone brightly. The starlight's veins quickly formed into a slender hand. The mysterious spirit hand of the 9-star sky sect was a very powerful martial art. The 7 stars' mysterious spirit hand was the top of the Earth's spirit realm, while the 9 stars' mysterious spirit hand was the best of the Earth's spirit realm. The moves of the 9 stars' mysterious spirit hand were exactly the same as the 7 stars' mysterious spirit hand, but its power was many times stronger. A palm blasted forward, shattering the sky. Everything would be shattered by this palm. The stalwart expert of the Skyscraper Society suddenly took a deep breath. His already strong chest expanded once again, as if it was about to explode. Then, he let out a loud roar with an astonishing momentum. The airwaves were like violent waves, but also like a thunderclap. However, this was not his attack. It was just the prelude to his attack. After that, the stalwart figure took up a stance. As he moved, he seemed like a ferocious tiger stretching its body, like a lion stretching its muscles and bones, and also like an enormous bear taking a step forward. An incomparably forceful and overbearing aura filled the surroundings. As soon as the stance was taken, the stalwart figure seemed to expand once again. Vaguely, one could see the shadow of a giant shrouding his body. Giant spirit fist. Giant spirit space explosion. With a low roar, the expert of the Skyscraper Society pushed out his hand. It seemed slow, but it was incomparably fast. Moreover, it carried a terrifying aura. His palm constantly changed in an instant, like a bear's paw and a tiger's claw. In the end, it condensed into a fist. This fist was like a meteor piercing through the sky. Its power was unparalleled. It was an extremely violent fist that displayed its power to the extreme. At least in Qinzong's eyes, there was no flaw to be found. Terrifying. Even if this fist didn't hit him, even if the wind from the fist brushed past him, it would still be enough to severely injure him. Qinzong's eyes focused. His gaze was sharp. He wondered if the ancient expert's evil corpse could withstand these two powerful attacks. Based on his intuition, Qinzong felt that it couldn't, because the attacks were simply too powerful. Boom! Boom! The profound spirit palm shattered the sky and fiercely blasted towards the ancient expert's evil corpse. An extremely terrifying fist energy that carried an extremely shocking power also blasted towards the evil corpse. Both of them had absolute confidence that this tyrannical killing move would be enough to shatter the other party. Boom! Boom! 2 loud sounds rang out. Countless pieces of gravel sputtered, carrying an extremely terrifying power that could easily kill an ordinary mid-Earth spirit realm expert. The entire cavern shook violently. Dust rustled down from above, as if it was about to collapse. Is he dead? The 9-star sky sect expert asked in a low voice. Immediately after, a sharp cold light shot out from his eyes. His eyes were like shooting stars as they landed on the imposing figure of the Skyscraper Society. Since the powerful evil corpse had been killed, the only thing left was the battle between the two of them. They'd met here, and both of them wanted the treasures on the other's body. One thing was for sure, the other must have a spirit gold mine. A battle was inevitable. The imposing figure of the Skyscraper Society was the same. His tyrannical aura condensed and rushed out, directly locking onto the nine-star sky sect expert. But before the battle between the two had even begun, a black and red sword light suddenly slashed out from the dust that filled the air. The sword light was shaped like a crescent moon. It swept across, as if it could split the world in half. An astonishing killing intent and malice was contained within. As it approached, the expressions of the two experts changed. They couldn't care less about the battle and hastily dodged the crescent moon-shaped black and red sword light. Shinzong was also startled. Fortunately, he'd restrained his aura and stood outside the cavern. He hadn't made the slightest movement, so he hadn't been detected. Chapter 920. The black and red sword chi was incomparably evil, and the murderous aura was earth-shattering. It crazily interweaved and slashed, covering the entire cave, making it impossible to dodge. The two powerhouses attacked one after another. Tyrannical power surged, shattering the malicious sword chi that was slashing towards them. After sweeping in all directions and regaining clarity, the two's expressions changed greatly. The evil corpse was still alive. Moreover, its body was surrounded by dense black smoke. The black smoke was like a set of armor, firmly protecting the evil corpse's body, making it impossible to see if its body was injured. In addition to protecting the evil corpse's body, the black smoke also wandered around its body like the tentacles of an octopus, like seaweed in the water. The long sword covered in blood continued to emit an astonishing murderous aura. It was terrifying to the extreme. What was even more shocking was that the evil corpse's eyes were actually more lively, as if it had intelligence. Moreover, it looked even colder. Kill. The obscure voice was like metal plates violently rubbing against each other. It was incomparably ear-piercing, making one's scalp tingle and extremely horrifying. This evil corpse actually opened its mouth to speak. Not only were the two powerhouses shocked, but Shinzong was also the same. As everyone knew, evil corpses did not have intelligence. They only had bloodthirsty instincts. However, this evil corpse was different. It could speak, so it obviously had intelligence. Whether its intelligence was high or low, it definitely had intelligence. The evil corpse's strength and speed were already very shocking, and its defensive power was even more terrifying. Its flaw was that it did not have intelligence, and its fighting style was simple and crude. However, if it had intelligence, it would be able to use its strength and speed better, and its advantages would be more thoroughly displayed. Moreover, this evil corpse's previous performance was already incomparable to other evil corpses. The instant the word kill fell, the evil corpse took a step forward. Although its movements still looked a little stiff, it was much more agile than before. Moreover, its speed seemed to be a little faster. Like a bolt of lightning, it instantly closed in on the powerhouses of the nine-star sky sect. The long sword covered in blood tore through the sky, bringing with it unparalleled malice and murderous aura. The powerhouses of the nine-star sky sect had an extremely solemn expression. If the previous evil corpse was troublesome to deal with because of its tough body that could withstand his attacks, the current evil corpse was already a real threat to him. The aura of that sword was incomparably sharp and had directly locked onto him. An astonishing malice and baleful aura constantly assaulted him, causing him to feel numb all over. This sword was not as crude as before. It contained a unique subtlety, as if it could pierce through all things. Break! With a low shout, the 9 stars suddenly gathered in his hand. The evil corpse's power, the evil corpse's power, the evil corpse's power. The starlight finger force pierced through the sky and shot toward the sword with unparalleled power. The evil corpse. The evil corpse's bodies is. The starlights. To the evil corpse, the evil corpse. 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 The evil corpse's body was extremely strong. With such a dense malice and baleful aura protecting it, it was even more difficult to deal with. That punch was like an itch. It did not have any effect. Then, a black-red sword light pierced through the air. The red had become very faint, and the black had become more and more profound. It was like splitting lightning. It was extremely terrifying. More than 1,000 meters away, Chunzong could still feel the terrifying aura. It was many times more powerful than the people he had killed before. After exchanging a few blows, Chunzong could tell that the two powerhouses were at a disadvantage even when they joined forces. "Bring out your full strength," said the powerhouse of the Nine-Star Sky Sect. His voice was neither fast nor slow. Okay. This was the voice of the powerhouse of the Skyscraper Association. It was powerful and buzzed. Chunzong realized that the two had not used their full strength just now. They must have been guarding against each other. He could not help but be even more surprised. With a boom, an even more terrifying aura exploded from the two. The shocking aura spread out, causing the ground to slightly collapse. Attack. Compared to before, the power was more than 30% stronger. For such an expert, a 10% increase in strength was already extremely terrifying, let alone a 30% increase. With two rumbling sounds, the evil corpse was once again forced back. The black smoke on its body was also instantly dispersed, revealing its body that was covered in wounds. At first, the two people's killing moves were not ineffective. They had indeed caused obvious injuries to the evil corpse's body. However, the evil corpse was not a living person. The injuries to its body did not affect it at all. Even if its arm was cut off, it would still not feel anything and would continue to attack. Of course, if the arms were cut off, the evil corpse's strength would be affected. However, the evil corpse's body was incomparably tough. Wanting to cut off its arms was very, very difficult. The evil corpse was forced back. As soon as it landed, it stomped on the ground, erupting with shocking power. With a boom, a crater appeared in the ground. Rubble flew everywhere. The evil corpse turned into a black bolt of lightning and pounced. The sword pierced through the air, piercing straight for the evil corpse. The pitch-black sword chi tore through the sky and suddenly exploded, turning into countless needle-like sword chi. They were densely packed like rain. They split into two and shot towards the Nine-Star, Celestial Sect, and Skyscraper Association experts. As soon as they came into contact, the two's expressions changed. The black needle-like sword chi could actually pierce through their power and shoot towards their bodies. The two realized how difficult it was to deal with the evil corpse. It seemed that as the battle continued, the evil corpse's technique became more and more tyrannical. It was as if the battle was awakening its former sword technique. In other words, the longer the battle dragged on, the more disadvantageous it would be for them, because no one knew how strong the evil corpse was when it was alive. If it was strong when it was alive and returned to its previous level, perhaps the two of them would not be its opponent. "Use whatever trump cards you have," said the Skyscraper Association's expert. All right. The Nine-Star Celestial Sect's expert did not hesitate. Although the two of them wanted to hide their trump cards so that they could kill each other after killing the evil corpse, the current situation was that if they did not kill the evil corpse as soon as possible, neither of them would gain the slightest advantage. Nine-Star Life Technique. The voice sounded, carrying an indescribable majesty, as if the might of the heavens had descended. 9 dots of starlight shone and fell one after another, hitting the Nine-Star Celestial Sect's expert's body and forming 9 marks that flickered with resplendent light. The man's robe also fluttered without wind. Specks of starlight lit up, illuminating the surroundings. After the Nine-Star Life Technique was used, he immediately used the first move of the Nine-Star Mystic Spirit Hand, Body Shattering. Although the first move was not as powerful as the second or the third, it was the best way to deal with the evil corpse. Only by smashing the body with one palm could the evil corpse be killed. Under the Nine-Star Life Technique, his potential was stimulated, and the power of the body-shattering palm increased by more than 2 times. The mysterious spirit hand that flickered with starlight bombarded the sky, causing streaks of black marks to appear in the air. The marks were irregular, as if the vacuum had been shattered. As soon as it came in contact with the evil black smoke surrounding the evil corpse, the black smoke instantly collapsed and dissipated. The stalwart expert of the Skyscraper Society also made his move. He crossed his arms and drew a circle in the air. His entire body's power surged out like a torrent. A vigorous golden chi condensed in the middle of the circle and condensed into a ball of light. The ball of light quickly expanded to the size of a human head. The power condensed inside the ball of light made people's hearts tremble. It seemed as if it could destroy the heaven and exterminate the earth once it erupted. With a boom, the skyscraper sex expert pushed his hands forward. That ball of light suddenly shot out like a comet. Ripples surged, destroying the heavens and the earth. Under the bombardment of the comet-like ball of light, the black smoke was completely shattered and scattered, revealing the evil corpse's body. Boom! Boom! The two powerful attacks hit the evil corpse's body at the same time. At the same time, all of the black smoke around the evil corpse's body poured into the blood-red sword in his hand. This sword silently streaked across, as if it ignored all distance. It directly crossed through time and space. The moment the sword was swung, it had already cut through the two experts' protective spirit energy and all of their defensive power, cutting through their skin. The two of them reacted very quickly, but they were still a bit too slow. A sword mark appeared on their chests. A shocking evil intent and evil aura crazily poured into their bodies through the sword mark, causing their faces to turn pale. Amidst the paleness, there seemed to be a trace of black that was quickly spreading. The evil corpse's body was hit. The body-shattering palm caused cracks to appear on the evil corpse's powerful body. It was like a ceramic that had been smashed. Then, the ball of light from the Skyscraper Society's expert was like a comet, exploding in an instant. The terrifying power of the attack directly shattered the evil corpse's already injured body, causing it to explode into pieces. After the evil corpse died, Chunzong keenly saw that a ring was shot out at an amazing speed with terrifying power. It shot deep into the cave wall and embedded itself in it. Gazing at the ring, Chunzong's heart suddenly became excited. That might be a virtual ring. There might be some good things in the virtual ring left behind by an evil corpse that was suspected to be an ancient expert. However, these two powerful experts would be a great hindrance. The strength they had shown was extremely tyrannical. Even if Chunzong activated the power of the sky-climbing tower, he was not sure that he could fight against two of them at the same time, or even one-on-one. Immediately, Chunzong also found that the situation of these two experts was not good. Black was constantly spreading on their faces, and on their necks and other places, traces of black could also be seen gradually becoming clearer. Traces of evil fluctuations were constantly being emitted. These two had been injured by the sword, and their bodies were being eroded by a strong, evil intent. This is a good opportunity, Chunzong said secretly. Being eroded by such a terrifying evil intent, one would have to spend a lot of energy to resist it. Their strength would undoubtedly be greatly reduced. This was the best time to deal with them. Chunzong's mind raced. In an instant, hundreds of thoughts flashed through his mind. He considered all kinds of situations and observed more carefully. Chapter 921. The experts from the Nine-Star Sky sect and the Skyscraper Society looked at each other and saw the black chi that was spreading on each other's skin. This black chi was condensed from the evil chi and malice of the evil corpse. It was more than 10 times purer than the evil power of the evil corpses they had encountered before, and it also had an amazing toughness. This evil corpse was suspected to be an ancient expert when it was alive, and it was very likely to be an expert from the famous sword sect. It was very powerful when it was alive, and after its death, it had been eroded by evil chi and malice for many years. It was more terrifying than an ordinary evil corpse, so its evil power was naturally more powerful. In particular, the last sword attack had gathered all the evil power in its body. Even though only a small part of it had invaded their bodies, it still made them feel uncomfortable. The evil power was madly spreading, devouring their vitality and strengthening itself. The consequence of this was that both of them would be eroded by the evil power and eventually become evil corpses. Now is not the time to make a move. Only by suppressing and expelling the evil power with all their strength could they avoid future troubles and fight each other. However, the two of them did not dare to expel the evil power here. It would take a lot of time and energy, and no one knew if something unexpected would happen. Therefore, their plan was very simple, which was to temporarily suppress the evil power. Although doing so would restrict nearly half of their strength, it was better than any accidents. However, even if they wanted to suppress the evil power, it would take some time. The two of them looked at each other and immediately sat down cross-legged. If we don't make a move now, when will we? Zong made up his mind. It was suspected that the ancient expert's void ring was embedded in the cave wall. He could erupt with full speed and take it away. What was certain was that the moment he made a move, these two experts would also react instantly and even join forces to intercept him. Therefore, he had to be fast enough. If he was fast enough, he would be able to take the ancient expert's void ring, but the consequence would be that he would be chased by these two experts. The consequences of being chased by these two experts were undoubtedly serious. Or, he could give up and immediately turn around and leave. Thinking about it, Zong made his choice. Wealth came from danger. Since he had entered this place to look for opportunities, and the opportunity was right in front of him, he could not miss it. As for the pursuit, he would think about it later. With this thought, Zong made up his mind and no longer hesitated. However, Zong did not appear so rashly. He instantly activated the sky-climbing tower and poured all his strength into it. Then, with shocking speed, it swept out like a raging wave. Zong did his best to cover up the fluctuations of this aura. He constantly endured the impact of this tyrannical power, and his muscles and bones kept shaking. When he felt that he had almost reached his limit, Zong stopped. In terms of absolute strength, he had already reached the 8th level of the extreme mortal realm. You're courting death. Just as Zong used the sky-climbing technique, the aura fluctuation alarmed the two powerhouses who were suppressing the evil force. They knew in an instant that someone was trying to snatch the food from the tiger's mouth. The ancient era's evil corpse was killed, and the suspected virtual ring was shot into the cave wall. The two of them saw it and were very tempted. However, they did not act because of the corrosion of the evil force. If they didn't suppress the evil force as soon as possible, the longer it took, the more difficult it would be to suppress it. Naturally, the cost would be greater. Therefore, the first choice of the two was to suppress the evil force first. Whoever suppressed the evil force first will be able to take the ring that seemed to be the void ring first. In short, although the two of them were sitting cross-legged and did not attack directly, the battle was already going on. They did not expect that someone would dare to attack them right under their noses. They did not have time to be surprised that someone had approached them without them noticing. Without hesitation, they attacked at the same time. Like a cold star chasing the moon, a finger pierced through the sky and shot towards Zong with a frightening force. An icy aura locked onto Zong from afar. It was the cold star finger. The cold star finger used by a peak 9th level Earth Spirit Realm expert was even more frightening. Even if he could only use 30% of his strength, it was still not something that an ordinary early 9th level Earth Spirit Realm expert could compare with. Although Zong had activated the power of the Sky Pagoda, he was unable to withstand the impact of too much power due to his physique. He could only control it at the 8th level of the Earth's Spirit Realm. It was a good thing that his opponent was holding back due to the corrosion of the evil force. Zong used the sky-climbing technique to dodge the cold star finger in an instant. The cold star finger hit the cave wall and shot out a deep hole that seemed to be bottomless. Suddenly, Zong's expression changed as he felt a frightening and vigorous force pressing towards him from all directions. That kind of vigorous force seemed to want to crush him. At the same time, he lost control of the power of the ley line that he controlled. The Skyscraper Society's expert had made his move and used the power of the ley line to deal with Zong. As soon as Zong landed on the ground, he immediately exploded with a tyrannical strength to resist the impact of the ley line. The Heavenly Will Sword was also unsheathed. Sword after sword, heavenly scars broke through the air and condensed into an incomparably majestic sword light, forcefully tearing a hole in the ley line in front of him. His strength exploded and the ground shattered. Zong turned into a ray of light and rushed out of the hole like a meteor. Whether it was cultivation or strength, these two were above him. They also had abundant battle experience. After all, they were much older than him and had more tricks up their sleeves. It would be very disadvantageous for him to stay and fight with them. From the beginning, Zong's goal was very clear. He wanted to take away the ring that seemed to be the virtual ring. If it was the virtual ring, he believed that there would be good things inside. If not, then Zong could only admit that he was unlucky. In life, how could there be so many things that could go according to one's wishes? Perhaps one would not be able to gain anything by fighting and risking one's life. However, if one did not fight and risk one's life, one would not be able to gain anything. With one sword strike, Chenzong broke out with his fastest speed and rushed out of the cave. At the same time, he waved his sword and released thousands of sword lights. The sword lights were densely intertwined and shot towards the experts of the Skyscraper Society and the 9-star Celestial Sect. Chenzong could also see that these two people were not in good condition. If he waited until they recovered, it would be even more disadvantageous for him. Facing the hundreds and thousands of powerful sword chi released by Chenzong, these two people looked slightly dignified. If they were in their heyday, they would naturally not be afraid of this level of attack, because it could not even break their protective spiritual power. But now, the evil force was raging in their bodies, constantly devouring their vitality and turning it into their own strength to strengthen themselves. They had not completely suppressed the evil force, so they did not dare to use too much strength. If they used too much strength in an instant, a part of the evil force that had just been suppressed would take the opportunity to riot, and then it would be more difficult to suppress it. Even though they were angry, they did not lose their minds. He attacked, shattering the sword chi. He used 40% of his strength to attack, which was the strongest attack he could muster at the moment. The strong cultivator of the Skyscraper Society punched out with his fist. The fist's strength was like a dragon or a tiger. It was extremely terrifying and also contained 40% of his strength. At the same time, the power of the ley lines also moved, stopping Chenzong's advance. Chenzong suddenly felt a chill run down his spine. The power of these two attacks was too tyrannical. It was completely beyond the limits of what he could withstand. Not daring to hesitate, Chenzong immediately activated even more of the Heaven Ascension Tower's power. The power of Heaven Ascension once again surged out from the Heaven Ascension Tower, filling his body, causing Chenzong to feel an even greater burden. This kind of burden seemed to be tearing his body apart from the inside. It was extremely painful. Withstanding the increasing pain, Chenzong was able to control more and more of the Heaven Ascension power. His strength rose rapidly, approaching the 9th level of the Earth's spirit realm. He struck out with his sword, infusing the Heaven Ascension power into the blade and releasing it. Slash, 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 slash. But Chenzong's goal wasn't to withstand the opponent's attack. He only needed to resist a little. While resisting a little, he also used his sword to break through the blockade of the opponent's ley lines and take the opportunity to escape. The two masters were indeed superior to Chenzong in terms of using the power of the earth veins. But because of the corrosion of the evil power, it was difficult for them to use their full power. They could only interfere with Chenzong, but it was difficult to suppress him. Slash, 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 slash. Chenzong had no choice but to vent the pain in his body. But Chenzong knew very well that this kind of venting was only temporary. As time passed, it would cause more and more damage to his body. Therefore, he had to leave this place as soon as possible and get rid of these two. The dense golden sword light tore through the sky like a roaring hurricane and blasted towards the two people. The power of the sword light was becoming more and more tyrannical. The two of them had no choice but to take it seriously. After all, they could only unleash 40% of their strength at the moment. Every time they unleashed their power, they were worried that the temporarily suppressed evil energy would erupt again. As they destroyed the sword lights, the killing intent in their hearts was unprecedentedly strong. It was as if they had never had such a strong desire to kill this person ever since they were born. Chapter 9:22. I've already memorized his face. Even if he changes his face, his aura won't change. Inside the huge cave, the 9-star Sky Sect expert's face was gloomy. His eyes were filled with terrifying killing intent, like two vortexes of starlight, as if they were going to devour everything. Die! The Skyscraper Society expert's face was full of anger, but that anger was deeply restrained. He only said one word in an extremely low voice, like the roar of an ancient beast, causing the surrounding air to vibrate. Chenzong naturally knew that the two masters had a strong hatred and killing intent towards him. Normally, he would not take the initiative to provoke them, but this was related to the void ring of an ancient master. This was a rare opportunity. If he missed it, he would not be able to encounter it again. Moreover, now that he had already acted, there was no reason to regret. As for the trouble that might arise later, he would deal with it later. The only thing he could do now was to improve his strength as much as possible. With the ascension to heaven force surging in his body, Qinzong used his body movement skill and flew out of the ninth spirit gold mine at an astonishing speed. The most important thing now was to find a relatively safe place to check what was inside the void ring. The moment the ring entered his hand, Qinzong felt the fluctuations within it. He was sure that this was the void ring. Qinzong's memory was amazing. Although there were many forks in the ninth spirit gold mine, Qinzong had already memorized the route he came from. Now, he only needed to leave along the way. Enduring the pain caused by the ascension to heaven force, Qinzong constantly vented this force to reduce the burden on his body. Rushing out of the cave, Qinzong waved his sword. A golden sword light broke through the air and slashed at the cave entrance. The tyrannical power immediately caused the cave entrance to collapse, sealing the entire cave entrance. The purpose of doing this was to stop the two terrifying experts. Although it couldn't trap them inside, it would still cause some trouble. Of course, Qinzong did not care about the other people who were still in the mine. After all, the sealing of the entrance was only temporary. With their strength, they could break it open. As soon as he rushed out of the ninth gold mine, Qinzong stopped using the Heaven Ascension power, and the Heaven Ascension power returned to the Heaven Ascension Tower. Qinzong's body felt empty, and he quickly took out various kinds of pills and stuffed them into his mouth to replenish his energy. After recovering some of his strength, Qinzong used the distance shrinking technique and quickly left. Not only was the Earth shrinking technique faster, but the aura it left behind was also weaker, making it harder to track. After leaving the ninth spirit gold mine, Qinzong finally stopped and continued to recover his strength. After a period of time, Qinzong recovered more than half of his strength, but the rest was still recovering on its own. He took out the black ring and examined it. Once again, he confirmed that it was the virtual ring. After it recognized him as its owner, Qinzong established a connection with the virtual ring. The virtual ring was more valuable and better than the mustard seed bag. Therefore, even after a long time, the virtual ring was not completely damaged. However, after it recognized him as its owner, Qinzong knew that the spirituality of the virtual ring was damaged. What a pity! According to the grade, this void ring should be medium rank, which was one grade higher than the one Yang Kai was currently using, and the internal space was also larger. However, because its spirituality had been damaged, the internal space had also been affected. The surrounding area was dark and filled with cracks, and these cracks were slowly spreading towards the center of the ring. When the cracks spread to the entire internal space, it meant that the virtual ring had lost its spirituality and was completely damaged. Of course, it would take a long time. In the space filled with black cracks, everything was damaged and broken. Only the things in the center of the space were still intact. Without hesitation, Qinzong immediately took out all the things that were still intact. There were not many things, only 3. This purple jade gourd was the size of a palm. It was warm all over and exuded a faint spiritual fluctuation. This was a middle-grade spirit artifact, and because it was stored in this middle-grade void ring, its spirituality had not been damaged. Qinzong was a little curious about the function of the purple jade gourd. A middle-grade spiritual weapon should be extraordinary. However, after looking at it for a while, he found nothing. It did not seem to be an offensive or defensive spiritual weapon. Was it an auxiliary spiritual weapon? He shook it gently, and there seemed to be a slight sound inside. After pulling out the purple jade gourd and putting it in, a slightly spicy elixir smell suddenly filled the air. Qinzong finally knew the function of the purple jade gourd, which was to store elixirs. It was very expensive to use a middle-grade spiritual weapon to store elixirs. At least, the jade bottles or gourds used to store elixirs that Qinzong had seen had not reached the level of a spiritual weapon. However, the reason why jade was used to store elixirs was mainly because of the particularity of jade. Jade was bred by heaven and earth, and had a unique spirituality and spiritual chi. It was most suitable to store elixirs and delay the loss of medicinal properties. Spiritual weapons made of jade had a great ability to store medicinal properties. Not only could it delay the loss of medicinal properties, but it could also lock the medicinal properties and constantly nourish the medicinal properties with its own spiritual chi, so that the medicinal properties of elixirs could be strengthened over a long period of time. This kind of enhancement might be insignificant, but it was better than nothing. Shenzong had only seen this kind of spiritual weapon made of jade and used to store elixirs in ancient books. This was the first time he had seen it in real life. Shenzong poured out the pills from the purple jade gourd. Each and every one of them was blood red in color and suffused with a faint halo. They were about the size of a pigeon's egg and looked pure and flawless. A trace of spicy smell came to Shenzong's nose, which made his chi and blood involuntarily run faster. There was no doubt that this was a body-refining elixir, but Shenzong couldn't identify what kind of elixir it was. Shenzong gently scraped off a bit of powder and threw it into his mouth before swallowing it. The powder turned into a stream of heat and instantly flowed into his chi and blood, causing his chi and blood to tremble slightly. The temperature of his chi and blood began to rise as his skin turned slightly red. It didn't take long for the medicinal properties to be absorbed, and Shenzong could feel that his chi and blood had been slightly strengthened. It worked. Shenzong couldn't help but be delighted. Body-refining elixirs were relatively rare and difficult to obtain. Even if he did obtain one, it might not be effective for him. Now it seemed that this unknown blood-red elixir was useful for him, and its effects were extraordinary. Good. Shenzong was secretly delighted. His chi cultivation was now at the beginning of the third level of the Earth's spirit realm, and his body-refining realm was also at the same level. But if he took these elixirs, his body-refining realm cultivation would be greatly improved. And the improvement of his body-refining realm cultivation would bring about a stronger physique. When he activated the Heaven Ascension Pagoda to release the Heaven Ascension power, he would be able to withstand more. Even if he didn't activate the Heaven Ascension Pagoda, a stronger physique would make his strength stronger, his speed faster, and his defensive power higher. Naturally, his strength would also be improved. All in all, there were many benefits. Shenzong checked and found that there were 12 unknown blood-red elixirs the size of pigeon eggs. But he didn't know what level his body-refining realm cultivation would reach if he took all of them. Find a relatively safe place and take these 12 elixirs. Shenzong thought to himself. In order to seize this void ring, he had offended the 2 experts from the 9-Star Sky Sect and the Skyscraper Society. They would definitely take revenge on him. The most important thing now was to improve his strength. Although he couldn't reach their level, as long as his physique became stronger, he would be able to withstand more Heaven Ascension power. At that time, he might be able to fight them. Putting the elixirs back into the purple jade gourd, Shenzong put the gourd away in his void ring for the time being. Then, he looked at other things. There was no spirit gold mine, but there was a black sphere. Opening the black sphere, there were grains of gold the size of rice grains inside. Looking at the grains of gold, Shenzong was delighted. Spirit gold. This was not a spirit gold mine, but a refined spirit gold. At a glance, Shenzong saw that there were 40 spirit gold grains. He didn't know how much spirit gold or was needed to refine these 40 spirit gold grains. But when Shenzong weighed them in his hand, he estimated that each spirit gold grain weighed about 3 qian. 1 jin was 10 liang, 1 liang was 10 coins. 40 grains of spirit gold that weighed about 3 coins added up to 1 jin and 2 liang. Upgrading an ordinary low-grade spirit weapon to a medium-grade spirit weapon requires 1 liang of spirit gold. My Heavenly Sword of Will is not an ordinary low-grade spirit weapon. If it is upgraded to a medium-grade spirit weapon, it will definitely consume more than 1 liang of spirit gold. Shenzong thought to himself. However, 1 jin and 2 liang of spirit gold should be enough to upgrade the Heavenly Sword of Will. The third thing was a fist-sized piece of white jade. The white jade was lustrous and glossy. It looked very magnificent and exuded a trace of pure spiritual chi. Qinzong looked carefully and found that there seemed to be two ancient characters on the white jade. Through the strokes, he could vaguely recognize the two characters. Famous sword. Famous sword. Qinzong frowned slightly and pondered. Then his eyes lit up. Is this an inheritance of the famous sword sect? The famous sword sect was an ancient sword sect. It was very powerful and was not inferior to the current top 15 forces. If it was an inheritance, it must be very extraordinary. Of course, whether it was an inheritance or not needed to be verified. However, now is not a good time to do so. Once again, Qinzong put the white jade into his virtual ring. As for the virtual ring that he had seized, it was gradually damaged. It was useless to keep it, so Qinzong threw it away. However, Qinzong did not throw it away casually. Instead, he chose a direction and threw the black ring. It flew across the sky like a meteor and disappeared into the distance at an amazing speed. This was also done out of caution, so as to avoid being tracked down. The direction that Qinzong left in was the opposite direction of the virtual ring. Moreover, he used the distance shrinking technique to leave. In this way, he would not leave any aura fluctuations. He would only leave aura fluctuations at the beginning and the end. It was more secretive than using a body movement. Chapter 9:23. With a boom, the ground trembled. The terrifying power shattered the earth, and gravel blocking the entrance of the cave, spraying out like lava. Amidst the billowing dust, a stalwart figure suddenly charged out and landed on the ground. His tiger-like eyes swept across the surroundings. A sharp glint shot out like cold lightning. His might was astonishing, and a wave of anger was deeply buried within. Shortly after, another figure rushed out, surrounded by strands of starlight. It was the Skyscraper Society and the 9-star Celestial Sect experts. They originally planned to spend some time suppressing the evil energy wreaking havoc in their bodies, but they didn't expect to be taken advantage of by others. Not only did they expend a lot of energy, but they also spent a lot of time and energy. In the end, they were both injured. After paying such a price, their spoils of war were taken away by others. How could they not be angry? How could they not be filled with killing intent? However, since the snatcher from the tiger's mouth had already escaped, and they were restrained by the evil force, they couldn't immediately give chase. Since that was the case, they might as well suppress the evil force first, or even expel it before making a move. They had already memorized the appearance and aura of the snatcher from the tiger's mouth, and they also knew his identity. He was from the Polar Heaven Association, so they weren't worried about him escaping. Thus, the two of them spent some time before finally expelling all the evil energy and recovering all the energy they had used up. Once they recovered, the two of them immediately chased after Qinzong and arrived outside the mine. They began to search for traces and auras left behind by Qinzong. However, Qinzong had used the earth-shrinking technique, and with the passage of time, there was almost no aura left behind. It was very difficult to find him. Whether it was the Skyscraper Society or the 9-star Celestial Sect experts, their faces were so gloomy that they seemed to be able to drip water. The killing intent in their eyes blazed like the sun. One could imagine that if they found Qinzong, there would be a storm. This was a very hidden cave. No one knew who had opened it, but now it was discovered by Qinzong. Qinzong entered the cave and sealed the entrance. It looked no different from the rest of the cave and was difficult to detect. The interior of the cave was not very spacious. It was about the size of a house, and there was nothing inside. He did not know what the person who opened it up used it for. No matter what it would be useful for him now. Qinzong took out an unknown body-refining pill and threw it into his mouth. Then he began to cultivate the 1,000 Refinements Mysterious technique. The 1,000 Refinements Mysterious art was an extreme-grade cultivation method, whether it was in the extreme mortal realm or the earth spirit realm. However, once it reached the profound sky realm, it would drop to an upper-grade cultivation method. As soon as the pill entered Qinzong's body, it immediately exploded. Amidst the roar, waves of blazing aura surged like waves, surging endlessly. It instantly spread out and filled every inch of Qinzong's body, surging within his limbs and bones. That aura was incomparably scorching, like a torrent of magma, constantly fusing into the pure yang blood qi. The pale golden pure yang blood qi seemed to be affected, and it seemed to be changing, its color deepening little by little. Qinzong's body kept moving. Under the thousand refinements' mysterious technique, the blazing torrent became fiercer and fiercer. It attacked Qinzong's body as if it had been tempered thousands of times, constantly refining and increasing the strength of his body. It was as if his body had turned into a piece of fine iron, being calcined in a blazing furnace. It was as if he had been calcined until he was red, then placed on an anvil and continuously hit by a giant hammer. Tempered thousands of times. The cultivation of the thousand refinements' mysterious technique was to use all kinds of movements to bring pressure to the body in order to achieve the goal of refining. Heat constantly spread out from Qinzong's body, filling up the secret underground cave, causing the temperature in the secret underground cave to rise continuously. If an ordinary person were to enter this secret underground cave, they would instantly suffocate to death and then be cooked by the amazing heat. The temperature kept rising, and without a place to vent, it kept accumulating and compressing, reaching a point where it could melt ordinary steel. However, the surrounding soil was different from the soil outside and was not affected by the high temperature. Qinzong felt as if his body was going to burn. His skin was completely red, and it was frighteningly red. About an hour later, the blazing heat gradually seeped into the soil, and Qinzong also refined and absorbed the medicinal efficacy, slowly returning to normal. Qinzong moved his hands and feet, feeling that his strength had increased a lot, and his strength had also become more powerful. He took out the second unknown body-refining elixir and took it again. Qinzong planned to refine and absorb all 12 elixirs in this secret underground cave and improve his cultivation of body refining as much as possible. What was certain was that if he took all 12 elixirs, his cultivation of body refining would at least improve by a large level. At least. After refining one elixir in an hour, the temperature in the secret underground cave didn't drop. Gradually, even the surrounding soil was affected, slowly turning red and starting to melt. After melting, the soil solidified together like molten iron, causing the walls of the secret underground cave to become even harder. When all 12 elixirs were finally refined, the color of the pure yang qi and blood seemed to have deepened, and the pure yang aura contained within them had also become denser. The strength contained within his bones and muscles had also increased greatly. Strong strength condensed and flowed slowly within his body. When Qinzong spread out his 10 fingers, there was a feeling as if he could split open a mountain, and the air around him rippled endlessly. He then clenched his 5 fingers, and an astonishing sound of air exploding rang out from his hands as ripples rapidly spread out. Very strong. Qinzong could feel that his strength had greatly increased, and had increased by quite a bit. My current cultivation of body refining should be equivalent to the initial 5th level of the Earth's spirit realm. Qinzong thought to himself, and his heart was filled with excitement. He'd originally been at the initial 3rd level of the Earth's spirit realm, but had now risen to the initial 5th level of the Earth's spirit realm after refining and absorbing the 12 elixirs. Such an increase was undoubtedly astonishing. After the increase, the power of the Void Sword would also increase, and his strength would also increase. Another important point was that a stronger body would be able to withstand more of the impact of the ascension to the heavens. The current me should be able to raise my strength to the peak of the 9th level of the Earth's spirit realm after activating the power of the Ascension Tower. Qinzong said to himself, unable to conceal the excitement in his eyes. If he gave it his all, he might be able to withstand even more of the ascension to the heavens. In this way, his safety in the Spirit Gold secret realm would be guaranteed. The threat that the 2 experts from the Skyscraper Society and the 9-Star Sky sect posed to him would be greatly reduced. After refining the 12 elixirs and increasing his strength, his qi training would gradually synchronize with his body training due to the unification of his lingwu. This was a mutual process. Just like how Qinzong's qi training had increased, his body training had also quickly caught up. However, the process of the two was different. After his qi training had increased, the spirit energy in his body would continuously nourish his body, causing his body training to increase as well. However, when his body training increased, his strength couldn't be used to nourish his spirit energy. Therefore, Chunzong had to replenish enough spirit energy to allow his qi training to quickly catch up with his body training. Even so, Chunzong felt that it was very good. At least it was 10 times faster than cultivating by himself. He took out a large amount of elixirs to aid his qi training and stuffed them into his mouth, chewing and swallowing them. They turned into strands of pure spirit energy that filled his body. Normally, Chunzong would have to refine them himself, and that would take quite a bit of time. But now, the spirit energy within the elixirs was rapidly being absorbed, and the energy of the earth vein was continuously flowing into his body, being refined into earth vein spirit energy and gradually increasing his cultivation. What a pity! Chunzong couldn't help but sigh. This speed was indeed more than 10 times faster than his usual cultivation, but unfortunately, the effects of the elixirs were quite mediocre. If he had an upper-rank spirit origin elixir or upper-rank earth vein elixir, he would have been able to increase his cultivation speed by more than 100 times. According to the current situation, it looked like his qi training wouldn't be able to reach the initial 5th level of the earth spirit realm in a short amount of time. However, Chunzong estimated that he would be able to do so in less than half a year, increasing his cultivation from the initial 3rd level of the earth spirit realm to the initial 5th level of the earth spirit realm in less than half a year. Who knew how frightening such a speed would be if he told others? Now that his cultivation was complete, it was time for the heavenly will sword. He drew out the long sword. Its blade as cold as autumn waters. Chunzong then took out the spirit metal. Chunzong's palms faced each other half a meter apart, slowly rotating them with the heavenly will sword in the middle. The true meaning of fire from the 3rd level of the materialization realm suddenly emerged, turning into a blazing flame that quickly engulfed the sword, causing it to turn bright red in the span of a few breaths as its temperature rose rapidly. A grain of spirit metal landed on the sword and quickly melted under the scorching heat. Compared to ordinary steel, spirit metal was naturally more difficult to melt, but it was much easier to melt than spirit metal ore. After the grain of spirit metal melted, it turned into strands of golden liquid that quickly flowed over the sword, completely covering it. It then slowly seeped into the sword under the scorching heat. It didn't take long for the liquid of the spirit metal to completely seep into the heavenly will sword and be completely absorbed by it. The heavenly will sword was used by Chunzong and had long since been refined by Chunzong. Therefore, Chunzong could feel some changes in the heavenly will sword. The 2nd, 3rd, and 4th grains of spirit metal flew up and landed on the scorching blade, quickly melting and spreading out to cover the entire sword. It didn't take long for the heavenly will sword to absorb 1 or 2 grains of spirit metal, but it showed no signs of evolving. This was within Chunzong's expectations, so he continued to pour in spirit metal. The more he poured in, the more spirit metal was consumed. Soon, half a kilogram of spirit metal had been consumed, but the heavenly will sword was still evolving. However, its aura was much stronger than before. Does it have to consume 1 kilogram of spirit metal like a mid-rank spirit weapon upgrading to an upper-rank spirit weapon? Chunzong couldn't help but speculate. Chapter 9:24. The ground shook slightly as a beam of bright sword light pierced through it, as if it was cutting through steel. It was then sent flying into the air by a powerful force. His figure flashed as he shot through the air from the cave entrance and landed lightly on the ground. His powerful aura was restrained in that moment, becoming completely still. His body was filled with power, and his pure yang qi and blood were like a raging tide and rumbling thunder. Chunzong looked into the distance with a faint smile on his lips. Greater strength brought greater confidence. He took a step forward, and his figure swept past like the wind. The scenery to his left and right flew past him at an astonishing speed. Although it hadn't been long since he'd entered the secret realm, he'd definitely gained a lot. Not only had his body refined to the early 5th level of the Earth Spirit realm, but the heavenly will sword had also been upgraded from a low rank to a mid-rank spirit weapon. However, due to the unique nature of the Heavenly Will Sword, Chenzong had used up a whole kilogram of spirit gold to upgrade it. After the upgrade, the Heavenly Will Sword was only a mid-rank spirit weapon, but its sharpness and power had reached the level of an ordinary upper-rank spirit weapon. There was an obvious difference between a low-rank spirit weapon and a mid-rank spirit weapon, and the difference between a mid-rank spirit weapon and an upper-rank spirit weapon would only be greater. The upgraded Heavenly Will Sword was enough to increase Chenzong's already powerful attack power by a lot. If Chenzong could only cut through wood before, he could now cut through stone. As for the remaining 2 kilograms of spirit gold, Chenzong didn't use it. He kept it for now, and perhaps it would come in handy in the future. Chenzong also absorbed the information within the white jade that seemed to be an inheritance. There was indeed some inheritance inside, but it wasn't a cultivation method or a soar method. It was a secret method called the miniature explosion sword art. The principle of this secret method was to gather energy in an instant, condense it, and then explode it, causing the speed and power of the sword to increase. The miniature explosion sword art was a secret method passed down from ancient times, and it gave Chenzong a different feeling than the current secret methods. Nowadays, all the secret techniques had all sorts of obvious side effects, but the miniature explosion sword art didn't have any. If there was a side effect, it would be that every time he condensed and unleashed his power, it would consume his strength by several folds. Chenzong had also spent some time cultivating, and he had also reached the beginner level. When he attacked with his sword, his power had increased by about 10%. 10%. It seemed to be quite low, but for experts, even a 10% increase was an advantage. It was extremely impressive. Chenzong also spread out his soul sense, which was distributed within a radius of 10,000 meters. If there was any abnormal aura fluctuation, he would be able to detect it immediately. Everything had its own aura fluctuation. Some were strong and some were weak, but as long as there was a fluctuation, Chenzong was confident that he could sense it. Suddenly, a shocking chill appeared, like a cold current in the extreme north. It made Chenzong's soul sense tremble slightly, as if it was frozen. At the same time, a frosty blue sword light pierced through the sky. It was like a huge icicle that carried with it an extremely terrifying destructive might. Wherever the sword light passed, frost would spread and quickly spread, freezing the sky and the earth. The killing intent of this sword was extremely strong, and it only wanted to kill Chenzong. From its appearance to its arrival, it was too fast. If Chenzong hadn't improved his cultivation, he probably wouldn't have been able to react. He twisted his body and moved in midair. The huge icicle sword light blasted past him, and the chill penetrated his bone marrow, as if even his soul was about to be frozen. After that, the frost swept out like a violent wave and swiftly spread out to cover the heavens and the earth. Only intense rumbling surged endlessly in the heavens and the earth. In an instant, Chenzong felt tiny, and it was as if he was facing the mighty, icy, cold force of nature. However, this feeling only lasted for an instant before disappearing. It was because this was not the true might of nature. Instead, it was a powerful sword move that was executed with great power. It contained the 4th level of the Great Ice Force, as well as the 2nd level of the manifestation level of the true meaning of ice and other powers. As the sword passed, everything within a radius of 10,000 meters was swallowed by a raging wave of frost. The ground was frozen, and the air was filled with ice shards. The chill was astonishing. The moment his opponent attacked, Chenzong had already recognized his identity. Fein Yoxia, the sword marquis of Ice Prison from the Skyscraper Society. Chenzong didn't find it strange that he wanted to kill him. Firstly, he was from a Skyscraper Society, which had always been hostile to the Skyscraper Society. It was normal for them to fight to the death when they met. Secondly, he had killed his younger brother with his own hands, and the hatred of killing his younger brother was irreconcilable. However, Chenzong wasn't going to wait for his death. The Heavenly Will Sword was unsheathed, and a terrifying sword chi surrounded the sword. This was not Chenzong's sword chi, but the Heavenly Will Sword chi itself. An upper-grade spiritual sword was more powerful than a middle-grade spiritual sword. Firstly, it was its spirituality, and secondly, it was its power. When a spiritual sword reached the upper grade, the spirituality it contained and the material it was made of had been enhanced. Together, the sharpness of the sword had been enhanced. That combination allowed the spiritual sword to emit sword chi of its own accord. That sword chi was not just for show. Chunzong had tested it out, and the sharpness of the sword chi of the heavenly will sword was not inferior to that of an ordinary lower-grade spiritual sword. The bursting sword chi almost left the sword and broke through the air, but Chunzong controlled it to increase the power of the sword. He slashed out. Heaven Scar. The gigantic sword light, which was hundreds of meters long, immediately split the sky apart. It even split the surging cold wave into two. Chunzong stood on the ground, and the cold wave rushed from both sides. The cold wind blew, and Chunzong's robe rustled. Most of the shocking cold was blocked by the protective spiritual power, and a small part of it invaded Chunzong's body. However, it did not cause any damage because Chunzong's pure yang qi and blood was so shocking that it could not be shaken by such cold. The cold wave swept out, shattering and freezing the ground behind it. In the biting cold wave, two figures faced each other from a distance of 1,000 meters. One was Chunzong, holding the heavenly will sword in his right hand. The tip of the sword was slanted low, and a ray of dazzling sword chi pulsed on the blade. The terrifying aura even pierced the ground under the tip of the sword. The other figure was a man in a frosty blue robe. He looked young, but he was not young. His face was cold, and his eyes were filled with bone-chilling, killing intent. The Marquis of Glacial Hell, Fei Nyoxia. An astonishingly cold sword chi circled around Fei Nyoxia's body, constantly moving and freezing everything around him. Fei Nyoxia's eyes were incomparably cold, as if he could freeze Chunzong's life and soul with a single glance. Today you must die. Fei Nyoxia's extremely cold words came out of his mouth. Although he was surprised that his two attacks did not work, he was more confident in himself. As soon as his voice fell, an astonishingly cold killing intent erupted from Fei Nyoxia's body, and the surrounding air froze. Fei Nyoxia then swung his sword, becoming one with the sword and turning it into a blazing giant icicle. It pierced through the sky, and his killing intent and strength were all integrated into the sword. His cultivation is at the 6th level of the Earth's spirit realm, but his strength is at the 7th level of the Earth's spirit realm. Chunzong thought to himself, this was Fei Nyoxia's strength. An ordinary 7th level of the Earth's spirit realm could probably reach the late 7th level of the Earth's spirit realm. In the past, Chunzong would have to activate the tower's power to deal with such an expert. But now, Chunzong did not intend to do so. Whether it was the explosive increase in his cultivation or the heavenly will sword, both had improved his strength significantly. The combination of the two made the increase in his strength even more obvious. The sword pierced forward like a flaming star. It was as urgent as a flaming star. The speed of the sword was faster than usual, piercing through hundreds of meters of the sky and heading straight for Fei Nyoxia. The blazing star emitted an astonishingly high temperature in the cold, melting the frost in its path in the blink of an eye. Wisps of white mist rose in spirals, like clouds or mist. Icebound 1,000 miles. The icicle shattered and exploded, and countless ice shards sputtered out, turning into wisps of frost that covered the sky and earth. In an instant, everything within a radius of tens of thousands of meters was frozen, turning into an icy land. Fei Nyoxia's figure suddenly flashed as he used the earth-shrinking art. He abruptly appeared behind Chunzong, his sword piercing through the air. The sword seemed to carry the power of tens of thousands of meters of frozen land. It was bone-chilling, freezing to the bone, and had an indescribable forcefulness. Chunzong's body suddenly stiffened. The shocking coldness assaulted him, and even his pure yang qi and blood couldn't completely resist it. But in an instant, pure yang qi filled the air and immediately dispelled the coldness. The sword pierced through the air and froze the air. Chunzong's figure was also pierced by the sword. The moment it pierced through him, he was also frozen into an ice sculpture. However, Fei Nyoxia wasn't happy at all. Instead, he was bewildered. This was because he didn't feel that the sword had pierced through his opponent. What was frozen was only an afterimage. A strong sense of danger suddenly assaulted him. Fei Nyoxia didn't even turn his head. He burst out with his fastest speed, spraying out a stream of frost as he rushed forward. At the same time, a beam of blazing sword light flashed past. Just a little bit more, and that blazing sword light would have pierced through him. Coldness and heat intertwined and collided with each other. The two constantly used the earth's shrinking art, appearing around each other in an untraceable way and attacking with their swords. Fein Yoshia's strength was very strong. He was once a king-ranked martial artist, and his control of his own strength had reached an astonishing level. Moreover, he had rich battle experience. Using all his strength, Chunzong couldn't do anything to him. However, Fein Yoshia was very shocked. He had used all of his strength, but he still couldn't threaten his opponent. A strong opponent. This was a frightening opponent. Fein Yoshia also knew that his opponent hadn't been in the Earth's spirit realm for long. It had only been 2 or 3 years, but he already had such strength. If he was given another 5 or 10 years, wouldn't he become even more terrifying? When that time came, it would be more than 10 times harder for him to take revenge. He might not even be able to do so. This wasn't the ending Fein Yoshia wanted. He and his younger brother, Fei Mingyu, had gone through hardships when they were young. They relied on each other and had a very good relationship. They had both agreed to step onto the peak of the martial Tao. He practiced the sword while his younger brother practiced the saber. The two of them had worked hard towards their goal. He had planned to celebrate his younger brother's ascension to the Earth's spirit realm, but he hadn't expected to be killed. Chapter 925. Under the red and gray apocalyptic sky, a patch of frost was rapidly spreading across the vast and barren land, covering an area of tens of thousands of meters. It looked like a snowfield on the ground. The white snowy plains were constantly emitting a shocking cold air, and there were even clouds of water vapor rising in spirals. 2 figures were flickering in the air, and every flicker was accompanied by an extremely sharp sword light that tore through the sky. Sword chi was surging. Phoenicia had unleashed his full strength out of his hatred and desire to kill Chunzong. Every strike was extremely powerful, as if it could freeze everything around it. When fighting against a strong enemy like him, the first thing one had to be wary of was the extreme cold. After all, not everyone was like Chunzong, who had a body of pure yang blood and pure yang energy, which was able to resist the invasion of the cold yin energy. If it were any other cultivator, they would be affected unless they practiced a blazing method. Just think about it. If 2 people of similar cultivation were to fight, and one party's strength and limbs were affected by the cold, they would become a little slow and stiff. Unknowingly, their reactions would be a little slower, and they would be at a disadvantage. They might even be killed. Phoenicia was known as the Sword Marquis of Glacial Hell. His Glacial Hell sword technique was terrifying and incomparably cold. He had killed countless strong enemies, some of whom were even stronger than him, but they had all been killed by the terrifying chill. His hatred gave birth to his desire to kill, which grew thicker and thicker. His attacks became more and more ruthless, but he still couldn't do anything to Chunzong. The Sword Marquis of Glacial Hell was indeed very strong. He had rich battle experience and superb fighting skills. His attainments in the Tao of the sword were also very high. To Chunzong, he was an excellent sword test and an excellent target to verify his own strength after his strength had greatly increased. After a fierce battle, Chunzong had a clearer understanding of his current strength. Before, he could only deal with ordinary 6th-level Earth Spirit Realm cultivators. But now, he could even fight an ordinary late 7th-level Earth Spirit Realm cultivator. Demonic Ice Ring. Suddenly, the Sword Marquis of Glacial Hell let out a low cry and swung his sword. An icy blue ring that looked like a decoration shot out along the blade of the sword. The icy blue ring grew in the wind and flew towards Chunzong at an astonishing speed. The bone-chilling aura locked onto Chunzong, making Chunzong feel that he couldn't dodge it. Staring at the enlarged icy blue ring, Chunzong felt a strong aura fluctuation from it. It was a middle-ranked spiritual weapon. Without a doubt, it was a support-type middle-ranked spiritual weapon. Its function should be to trap the target and lock it tightly. If one was trapped and locked by the ring, they would instantly lose the ability to resist and be killed by the sword marquis of glacial hell. His intuition should not be wrong. Thus, no matter what, Qinzong would not allow himself to be trapped by the ice blue ring. However, the ring had locked him in place. Heavenly Scar. The sword pierced through the air and struck the ring, causing an ear-piercing sound to ring out. The tyrannical sword strike immediately sent the ring flying. Ice fragments sputtered everywhere, and a sword mark several inches deep could be vaguely seen on the ring. The corners of Fini Xie's eyes twitched. The demonic ice ring wasn't easy to come by. It was a mid-rank spiritual weapon that he had obtained along with the glacial hell sword art. Although it was a mid-rank spiritual weapon, its value was higher than most mid-rank spiritual weapons. It was also astonishingly hard. Most mid-rank spiritual weapons couldn't even leave a mark on it. But now, his opponent had left a mark several inches deep on it. An upper-rank spiritual weapon. Phoenicia didn't have time to feel heartache. His eyes shone with a sharp light as he stared at the sword in Qinzong's hand. His heart was surging with emotions, and he couldn't wait to take the sword for himself. If he had an upper-rank spiritual weapon, his strength would definitely increase by a lot. The value of an upper-rank spirit weapon far exceeded that of a mid-rank spirit weapon. Normally speaking, those in the Earth spirit realm would at most use mid-rank spirit weapons. Upper-rank spirit weapons were exclusive to those in the Sky Profound realm. Some of the weaker Sky Profound realm practitioners even used mid-rank spirit weapons. If an earthly spirit realm expert had an upper-rank spiritual weapon, he or she must have had a fortuitous encounter or a shocking background. But no matter which one it was, the upper-rank spiritual weapon would be his as long as he killed his opponent. Now, Phoenicia had another reason to kill Qinzong. The demonic ice ring turned in the air and flew in a beautiful arc towards Qinzong from the other side. At the same time, Phoenicia brandished his sword and stabbed at him from another angle. The sword seemed to have condensed the power of an iceberg. The blade couldn't be seen, and only an icy blue light with an extreme white light could be seen piercing through the air like a shooting star. Nothing could stop this sword. Everything would be shattered. The power condensed in this sword made Qinzong's heart jump. If he was hit, even his strong body wouldn't be able to withstand it and would be shattered in an instant. Attacked from the front and back, whether he was hit by the ring or the sword, the result would be terrible. Taking a deep breath, a strong power surged in his body. Miniature explosion swordsmanship. With a low shout, the power condensed and then exploded. The sword burst out with an astonishing amount of starfire. Man and sword became one, and a dazzling ball of starfire broke through the air. Starfire Sky Strike. This was the strongest and most violent sword strike. It blasted towards Phoenicia, and at the same time pulled away from the demonic ice ring. As long as he killed Phoenicia, the demonic ice ring would lose control and would no longer be a threat to him. Under the miniature explosion swordsmanship, the Starfire Sky Strike's power was increased by another 10% and became even more terrifying. The sword marquis expression changed, but there was no room for negotiation. Even if he wanted to use a secret or forbidden technique, it was too late. He gambled on this sword strike. Phoenicia was very clear that he had to catch and defeat his opponent, or else he would die. Facing death and fighting for survival, the momentum of this sword grew stronger once again. Qinzong's belief was also firm. This sword strike was extremely powerful, and he swore to kill his opponent. There was a loud boom. It was as if a blazing meteor had collided with an ice-cold meteor. The instant impact of ice and fire caused an incomparably terrifying explosion. The blue and red intertwined as if they were inseparable. Everywhere they passed, everything was frozen and burned, turning into powder. Layers of red and blue shockwaves surged in all directions, and Qinzong and Phoenicia's bodies flew back uncontrollably. The demonic ice ring that was shooting towards Qinzong was also heavily impacted by the shockwaves. It was like a small boat in the sea, constantly swaying. The terrifying shockwave caused Qinzong to fly back hundreds of meters. His qi and blood were in turmoil, but Qinzong's body was strong enough to withstand the shockwaves and shockwaves. On the other hand, Phoenicia's strength was incomparable to Qinzong's. His body's ability to withstand the shockwaves was far inferior to Phoenicia's. He flew back thousands of meters, spitting out 3 mouthfuls of blood, and his face was pale. He only felt a blazing power raging in his body, and had to use his own strength to suppress and expel it. Chinzong paused and swung his sword again. It was as fast as a spark. This time, he also used the miniature explosion swordsmanship, but the sword was faster and more powerful. It crossed more than 1,000 meters and stabbed towards Phoenicia. The injured Phoenicia hurriedly swung his sword to block, but Chinzong's second sword arrived. The third sword, the fourth sword, the fifth sword suddenly changed. It was no longer as fast or violent, but had an indescribable nimbleness and fleetness. Unicorn's Heart. Although the power of this sword was not as strong, it had an advantage in that it could not be dodged. Phoenicia, who was seriously injured, had no chance to do anything else. Whether it was using a secret technique or something else, it would take some time. Coincidentally, Chinzong's 4 consecutive sword strikes forced him to use all his strength to deal with it. The fifth sword, which could not be dodged or resisted, was directly hit. Although the Unicorn's Heart was not the strongest, it was not weak either. It directly penetrated Phoenicia's protective spiritual energy and pierced his shoulder. With a shake of the sword, a terrifying force wreaked havoc in the sword wound. The sixth sword, Heaven's Scar. A pale golden sword, Qi, seemed to come from the distant horizon. Like a line between the sky and the water, it spread to the distant horizon at an astonishing speed, as if the sword had separated the sky from the earth. At the same time, the sword swept past Fei Niuxie's body. Fei Niuxie's eyes widened as he stared at Chinzong. In that instant, he felt a sharp pain sweep through his body. He knew that he had been hit by the sword and had been cut in half at the waist. His strength was rapidly draining from his waist. Even if he wanted to fight for the last time, he could not muster the slightest bit of strength. His vision gradually darkened as if night had fallen. His consciousness grew fainter and fainter. With a clang, the icy blue ring fell from the sky, splashing mud everywhere. It quickly shrank and returned to its original small ring shape. Other than the icy blue color, there were only some complicated patterns on it. There seemed to be nothing special about it. Chinzong opened his hand and the ring flew into it, emitting a wave of cold energy. As for the sword marquis of Ice Prison, his eyes were wide open. He died with remaining grievances. His original purpose for attacking Chinzong was to avenge his brother. Then, there was the enmity between the Skyscraper Association and the Polar Sky Association. Then, there was the addition of Chinzong's high-grade spiritual sword. He did not expect that in the end, he would be killed by Chinzong. After killing Sword Marquis of Ice Prison, Chinzong felt a little relieved. After all, Sword Marquis of Ice Prison did pose a threat to him. Of course, it was only a small threat. Phoenicia's ring was also a low-grade void ring. Chinzong found a dozen pieces of spirit gold ore in it. There were other things, but they were all elixirs and spirit herbs. None of them were particularly good. Chinzong stored them away as if they were part of his collection. Whether he would sell them later or contribute them to the Polar Sky Association, it was fine. As for the sword used by Sword Marquis of Ice Prison, it was also a mid-grade spiritual weapon. It was ice blue in color and constantly emitted threads of cold energy, condensing ice fragments in the air. Chapter 9:26. The vast land was barren and endless. A stalwart figure came from afar at an astonishing speed, like a bouncing star, breaking through the air and arriving at this place. The earth was like a drum, and the man was like a hammer. Countless sound waves rippled out as the ground shook. The stalwart figure landed on the ground and was about to spring up again when he caught a glimpse of a nearby corpse out of the corner of his eye. The severed head of the corpse happened to be facing his direction. Fei Niuxie. The stalwart figure was bewildered. This stalwart figure was the expert from the Skyscraper Society, the one that Chinzong had snatched from the tiger's mouth. Coincidentally, his path was close to Chinzong's, and he'd seen Fei Niuxie's corpse. Fei Niuxie was known as the Sword Marquis of Glacial Prison and was one of the disciples of the Skyscraper Society's head. His potential was exceptional, and his strength would likely surpass his own in the future. He might even be on par with Lord Maniac. But now he'd been killed. Who killed him? One could only imagine how furious the society head would be when he found out that his disciple had been killed. The stalwart figure couldn't help but shudder at this thought. This aura. The stalwart figure sensed the residual sword aura, and his expression changed again. It's him. How dare he kill the society head's disciple? He was incomparably furious. Kill. He had to kill that person. Only then would he be able to appease the society head's wrath. The icy blue ring shot out at the speed of a human, instantly enlarging and trapping the evil corpse. The trapped corpse couldn't move in an instant as a faint layer of frost spread out from the center of the ring and covered the corpse's body. Qinzong didn't draw his sword immediately, but observed the corpse's struggles. This icy blue ring was the demonic ring of ice. He'd obtained it after killing Fei Nyoxia and should be quite powerful, but its actual strength was yet to be tested. Therefore, Qinzong began to look for targets to test after refining it. His first target was a 4th-level Earth Spirit Realm evil corpse. It couldn't move at all after being trapped by the demonic ring of ice, and its entire body was frozen into an ice sculpture. The second target was naturally the evil corpse at the 5th level of the Earth Spirit Realm. It was also unable to move after being trapped, and was quickly frozen into an ice sculpture. Now it was time for the third target, an evil corpse that was equivalent to the 6th level of the Earth Spirit Realm. Qinzong wanted to see if he could freeze it. The result was very gratifying. Even though the evil corpse continued to struggle, it was still unable to avoid being sealed in ice. The time it took was about a breath longer than before. Let's find another 7th-level Earth Spirit Realm corpse to try. Qinzong thought to himself as he waved his sword, shattering the corpse's body and putting away the demonic bracelet. The frost magic ring turned into an icy blue ring on his left index finger. However, 7th-level Earth Spirit Realm corpses weren't that easy to find. Qinzong didn't find any as he walked forward. The power of the cold, ice demonic ring is related to my cultivation. Using my own power to activate it will determine the power of the cold, ice demonic ring. Qinzong made his guesses as he searched for his target. There's no pressure in dealing with 6th-level Earth Spirit Realm corpses. I should be able to deal with normal 7th-level Earth Spirit Realm corpses. As for 8th-level Earth Spirit Realm corpses, I don't know. Time flew by. Qinzong sometimes used movement techniques, and sometimes the earth shrinking technique. Because of his body refining cultivation, his cultivation of qi was also gradually increasing. This was because Qinzong would also hold mid-rank spirit sources and earth vein essences to absorb the energy within and convert it into earth vein energy to increase his cultivation. Time flew by, and a month had passed. Qinzong's cultivation had also increased from the early 3rd-level Earth Spirit Realm to the mid-3rd-level Earth Spirit Realm. Without wholeheartedly cultivating in a place like the Spirit Gold Secret Realm, it was already good that his cultivation hadn't decreased. It was undoubtedly shocking that his cultivation could still increase. However, this was due to the increase in his body refining cultivation. Even in the outside world, where the energy of heaven and earth and the energy of earth veins were dense, it was impossible to increase one's cultivation from the early 3rd-level Earth Spirit Realm to the mid-3rd-level Earth Spirit Realm in a short month. The increase in cultivation naturally brought about an increase in strength. With such strength, Qinzong was confident that he wouldn't need to use the miniature explosion sword art to suppress Fei Nyoxia. According to the situation 1,000 years ago, the Spirit Gold Secret Realm would be open for about 3 months. However, he wasn't sure this time. It might be longer, or it might be shorter. In short, it was necessary to buy some time to search for Spirit Gold ores. However, other than the initial harvest, Qinzong didn't gain much in the following month. The Spirit Gold ores he found were only scattered. The attack of the evil intent was defeated by Qinzong. That bit of spirit intent didn't increase Qinzong's consciousness by much, but the important thing was that the spirit intent contained some fragments of memory. The fragments of memory allowed Qinzong to learn a very important piece of information. Could there be more Spirit Gold ores or Spirit Gold ores in the famed sword sex base? Qinzong thought to himself and immediately adjusted his direction. The memory fragment contained in the evil spirit's spirit showed that it was a base left behind by the Mingjian sect in this place. Speaking of which, when the famed sword sect had first discovered the spirit gold secret realm, they had set up a base here. Therefore, there was more than one base. The purpose of setting up a base was naturally to better mine spirit gold. Therefore, there was a chance that he could find spirit gold ores that hadn't been taken away, or even spirit gold that had already been refined. Perhaps he would have to fight with others on this trip to find the famed sword sect's base, but Qinzong wasn't afraid. This was the confidence that came with increasing strength. No matter what, the highest level of strength in the spirit gold secret realm was the peak of the 9th level earth spirit realm. Since he hadn't reached the emperor realm yet, he could still fight with his own strength. Just as Qinzong had guessed, there were a few people who knew about the famed sword sect's base, and some of them had found it through the memories of the evil intent after killing it. The huge palaces were located on the barren land. The palaces on the periphery had already collapsed due to the previous battles. Only a few palaces inside were barely intact. Seeing the relatively intact palaces, Qinzong's eyes shone brightly. His body flashed, and he immediately approached. At the same time, there were also people approaching from other directions. The doors of these palaces were all wide open, as if they were completely unguarded. However, when Qinzong rushed to the entrance of one of the palaces, he stopped. The inside of the palace was pitch black, and Qinzong vaguely felt a trace of danger. It was as if something terrifying was waiting for him inside. Just as Qinzong's body stopped moving, a figure flew towards him at an astonishing speed. Without any hesitation, he rushed into the palace. The moment he passed by, Qinzong saw a trace of disdain thrown at him, as if mocking him for being a coward. Qinzong didn't mind. His senses had always been accurate, and if he sensed danger inside, it was most likely dangerous. Danger wasn't a reason for him to retreat, but he should at least be more cautious. He shouldn't ignore all dangers just because he thought he had some strength. Confidence meant that he had the ability to face all kinds of dangers, but it didn't mean that he was arrogant. Blindness meant that he was overconfident and became arrogant, thinking that he could ignore all dangers. Some dangers might only cause injuries, but if he didn't pay enough attention to them, they could be fatal. Qinzong was confident, but not arrogant. Qinzong knew from the fluctuations of the person's aura that he was a cultivator of the 6th level of the Earth Spirit Realm. Since he had entered first, he could observe the situation. A strange roar rang out, and a shocking killing intent rolled out like a tide. Shouts also rang out with a trace of panic. Violent explosions rang out and reverberated within the palace, returning to silence after a few breaths. Then, the shocking killing intent and malice disappeared as well, as if they had never appeared. Evil corpse. Qinzong's eyes focused as a sharp light swept through the depths of his eyes, as if it wanted to pierce through the darkness within the palace. If he'd only felt danger before, then he'd felt a bit more pressure now. Evil corpse. There were evil corpses within the palace, and possibly even evil thoughts. And there was more than one. The person just now was of the 6th level of the Earth Spirit Realm and wasn't weak. A battle had broken out immediately after he'd entered, but it had only lasted for a few breaths of time. In other words, a 6th level Earth Spirit Realm cultivator had been killed in just a few breaths of time after entering the palace. If there was only one evil corpse, then its strength would at least be at the 8th level of the Earth Spirit Realm. But Qinzong was certain that there was more than one evil corpse, and their strength shouldn't be low. Qinzong's thoughts ran through hundreds of thoughts in an instant. Then, Qinzong strode through the open palace doors, and his figure was swallowed up by the darkness. But it wasn't true darkness. When Qinzong stepped in, he only felt that the light was a bit dim, and it didn't affect his vision at all. Qinzong swept his eyes over the palace, searching for the source of the danger. The strange thing was that he didn't find anything. Everything that had happened just now wasn't an illusion. Qinzong swept his eyes over the palace again, and a sharp light shot out from his eyes. Numerous figures stood quietly in the corners of the palace, looking like statues, but it made Qinzong's pupils contract. Evil corpses. They were all evil corpses, and there were dozens of them. They were like statues, and not the slightest bit of aura leaked out from them. In the next breath, Chunzong felt his hair stand on end. Numerous cold and malicious gazes fell upon him, and each gaze brought great pressure to him. In addition, there was a very obscure gaze that swept over him. Chunzong didn't know where the obscure gaze was, but it brought great pressure to him. The pressure made it hard for him to breathe. In the next breath, the dozens of evil corpses all moved. A shocking evil aura and malice spewed out from their bodies. It was very strong and filled the palace, causing the already dim light to dim even more. Chapter 9:27. The baleful aura and malice emanating from the dozens of corpses was incomparably frightening. The entire palace was instantly filled with a frightening, evil aura. The aura was incomparably dense, surging endlessly like a tide of evil, rushing in from all directions. In the next breath, the dozens of corpses all moved. From standing still like statues to pouncing like lightning, there was no abruptness in between. Their speed was incredibly fast, inconceivably fast. Chunzong felt his scalp go numb. He was finally sure why the 6th-level Earth Spirit Realm cultivator who'd entered first had been killed in just a few breaths of time. The aura emanating from each of the dozens of corpses was very strong. They were at least at the 6th level of the Earth Spirit Realm, and the stronger ones were at the 8th level. Think about it. What would it feel like to be surrounded by dozens of corpses that were at least at the 6th to 8th level of the Earth Spirit Realm? It was like a lamb entering a pack of wolves. Even if Chunzong didn't think he was a lamb, he still couldn't help but feel his scalp go numb. The dense evil aura continuously pounded against his body. The charging corpses reached out with their sharp claws, tearing through the darkness. Kill! With a low roar, Chunzong completely vented out the surging emotions in his heart. The heavenly will sword was unsheathed and streaked across the sky, emitting a sparkling sword light in the dark palace. It spread out like a ring of stars, and an incomparably tyrannical force instantly bombarded the charging corpses in all directions. The might of this attack had reached the 7th level of the Earth Spirit Realm. The corpses that weren't at the 7th level of the Earth Spirit Realm all retreated at an even faster speed after being hit. The corpses of the 7th level of the Earth Spirit Realm also instantly fell to the ground. Only the 3 corpses of the 8th level of the Earth Spirit Realm were unaffected. They shattered the sword light and continued to pounce towards Chunzong Fei. The pressure that the 3 8th level Earth Spirit Realm corpses brought to Chunzong was very obvious. He struck out again. The sword light was extremely fast. Under the activation of the miniature explosion sword art, Heavenly Scar slashed out, drawing an incomparably sharp trajectory as it slashed at the 3 corpses at the same time. After a period of cultivation and execution, the miniature explosion sword art had reached great success from the beginning. Its power had also increased from the initial 10% to 30%. The difference between 30% and 10% was huge. The additional 20% was enough to increase the power of Chunzong's sword. The 3 corpses at the 8th level of the Earth Spirit Realm paused for a moment before being sent flying backwards by this powerful strike. Their tough bodies had been torn apart by the blade, leaving behind a long gash. However, this kind of injury was nothing to the evil corpses. Dozens of evil corpses pounced again, and their low roars were even more terrifying. Chunzong immediately retreated out of the palace with a solemn expression. The pressure from the dozens of evil corpses was too great. Without confidence, it was best to retreat first. Of course, if he could activate the power of the Tower of Ascension, his strength would become even more powerful. But the problem was that it was not easy to kill these evil corpses. Most importantly, the gaze that was spying on him in the dark gave Chunzong a lot of pressure. One could imagine how terrifying the strength of the owner of that gaze was. Chunzong was not confident that he could deal with them. However, just as Chunzong was about to leave the palace, the open doors suddenly closed with a bang, sealing Chunzong within the palace. He struck out with his sword, and the light of the sword tore through the darkness, viciously slashing towards the closed door. Rumbling sounds rang out, echoing endlessly within the palace. The closed door did not budge at all, and Chunzong's powerful strike did not leave a single mark on it. Chunzong's expression immediately turned grave. The dozens of evil corpses approached at an astonishing speed, and a terrifying evil aura pressed down like a raging tide. Turning around, Chunzong's face was grave as his back faced the closed door. His eyes were as sharp as the edge of sword as he stared at the dozens of evil corpses in front of him. At least in this situation, he would not be attacked from the front and the back. This situation was completely out of Chunzong's expectations, but since things had come to this point, he could only face them with all his might. Taking a deep breath, a cold aura poured into his body, causing Chunzong to feel a chill run down his spine. Chunzong was ready to cut off all means of retreat. He planned to use the power of the Sky Tower to kill these evil corpses. However, the actions of the evil corpses caused Chunzong to pause. The dozens of evil corpses did not immediately charge over, but instead stopped 100 meters away from Chunzong. Their green eyes were suffused with a luster that caused Chunzong's scalp to tingle. What's going on? A thought flashed through Chunzong's mind. This situation was a bit strange, and Chunzong could not figure it out. It seemed to be a conspiracy. The evil corpses moved again. A group of 6th-level Earth Spirit Realm evil corpses moved forward, increasing their speed as they closed in on Chunzong. The 7th and 8th level Earth Spirit Realm evil corpses remained motionless, as if they had turned into statues again. There were a total of 63 evil corpses within the palace. There were 42 6th level Earth Spirit Realm corpses, 18 7th level Earth Spirit Realm corpses, and the remaining 3 8th level Earth Spirit Realm corpses. Now, there were 42 6th level Earth Spirit Realm evil corpses closing in on them in a fan shape. Even if they were only at the 6th level Earth Spirit Realm, 42 evil corpses still brought a lot of pressure to Chunzong. Although he didn't know what the enemy wanted to do, this wasn't enough for Chunzong to activate the power of the tower. No matter what their goal is, I will use the sword in my hand to shatter them. Chunzong's tone was incomparably resolute, and his eyes were even more resolute. With the heavenly will sword in hand, strands of cold light mixed with sword aura drifted about, slicing through the air around them. Chunzong's sharp eyes quickly swept over and took in all 42 evil corpses. He could clearly see the order of the 42 evil corpses, their movements, and every minute movement. They were all within his grasp. In that instant, Chunzong also formulated the best way to fight. His body swayed as his left foot took a step to the upper left. He waved the heavenly will sword and stabbed forward with astonishing power. This sword strike was as swift as a spark. The evil corpse on the left closest to him was directly hit, and the terrifying edge of the sword pierced through the evil corpse like a hot knife through butter. In the next moment, the spark suddenly expanded and spread out with astonishing speed, covering the evil corpse's entire body. The evil corpse became a burning corpse in the blink of an eye. The fire was incomparably fierce and quickly burned the evil corpse. The smell of burnt flesh immediately filled the air and floated in the air, making one feel nauseous. The space within the palace was sealed off, so the smell of burnt flesh couldn't spread out. It only lingered in the air and continued to accumulate. Chunzong's expression didn't change in the slightest, as if the nauseating and dizzying smell didn't exist. The second sword strike killed another evil corpse. The third strike, the fourth strike, the fifth strike, Chunzong killed a corpse with every strike. In the span of a few breaths, 12 evil corpses had been killed by Chunzong. The evil corpses were extremely fast, and the distance was short. Chunzong being able to kill 12 of them was already the highest efficiency that he could deduce. The remaining 36th level Earth Spirit Realm evil corpses had already closed in and were launching their most ferocious attacks at Chunzong. Chunzong deployed the profound heart transformation method to the extreme. His body was incomparably nimble as he shuttled through the 30 evil corpses as if he were weightless. He constantly dodged their attacks and counterattacked with his sword at the same time. With 12 fewer evil corpses, the pressure on Chunzong lessened quite a bit. Although the evil corpses were strong and fast, they weren't nimble enough and didn't have any techniques to speak of. Their strong defense was nothing to the heavenly will sword, which had the power of an upper-rank spirit sword. It was as if they were made of paper. One strike, one kill. 30 evil corpses were all killed by Chunzong under his full strength. The stench didn't disperse, and condensed here. A single breath made Qinzong feel dizzy, and he hurriedly held his breath. The 42 6th level Earth Spirit Realm evil corpses had all been killed. At this moment, the 18 7th level Earth Spirit Realm evil corpses moved. Qinzong's expression grew more and more solemn. If the 42 6th level Earth Spirit Realm evil corpses were only a slight threat to him, then the 18 7th level Earth Spirit Realm evil corpses were a true threat to him. This was because the 18 7th level Earth Spirit Realm evil corpses were absolutely stronger than the 42 6th level Earth Spirit Realm evil corpses. The 18 7th level Earth Spirit Realm evil corpses pounced forward one after another at an even faster speed. Qinzong's gaze was sharp as he brandished his sword and became one with the sword. He was as swift as a swimming dragon as he passed through two evil corpses in the blink of an eye. With two loud booms, the two 7th level Earth Spirit Realm evil corpses seemed to have been set ablaze by the fierce flames. The sparks were incomparably hot and frightening. Even the 7th level Earth Spirit Realm evil corpses couldn't withstand it with their strong bodies. As he moved, Qinzong narrowly avoided the evil corpses' pouncing attacks as he struck out with his sword. He even deployed the miniature explosion sword art and killed all 18 7th level Earth Spirit Realm evil corpses in the end. However, Qinzong wasn't the slightest bit happy because there were still 3 evil corpses left. They weren't 6th level Earth Spirit Realm or 7th level Earth Spirit Realm corpses, but the even more powerful 8th level Earth Spirit Realm corpses. Any 8th level Earth Spirit Realm evil corpse was enough to give him a great deal of pressure, not to mention 3. The 3 evil corpses moved and pounced from the left, center, and right. They were as fast as lightning as they tore through the air, closing in on Qinzong in an instant. Their sharp claws tore through the air, causing Qinzong's expression to change and his hair to stand on end. Compared to the sword marquis, these evil corpses were even stronger. The demonic ice ring also struck out at that moment, shooting directly towards the evil corpse in the middle and enveloping it in an instant. The terrifying power of ice quickly spread out and covered the evil corpse's entire body. However, the evil corpse continued to struggle, resisting the spread of the ice with its terrifying evil strength. With no time to lose, Qinzong turned the impossible into the possible and broke free from the combined attacks of the 2 powerful evil corpses. His sword pierced through the air and slashed towards the evil corpse's head that was temporarily enveloped by the demonic ice ring. This sword strike was incomparably powerful. Starfire Sky Strike, a sword strike that had been executed with all his strength just to kill the enemy. With a bang, the 8th level Earth Spirit Realm corpse's head was instantly hit and half of it exploded. Qinzong immediately followed up with a second blow. Heavenly Scar. The sword slashed through the corpse's broken neck and severed its head. The headless evil corpse couldn't resist the power of the demonic ice ring. Frost quickly spread, and it immediately turned into an ice sculpture. The other 2 evil corpses pounced towards Qinzong, who immediately defended himself. Chapter 928. The demonic ice ring was shockingly cold, and frost quickly spread out in all directions. The corpses on the ground were all covered in frost, as if they were corpses under the heavy snow in the extreme north. The 2 8th level Earth Spirit Realm corpses continued to attack, their incredible speed covering up their weakness in technique. Every attack of the corpses was as fast as lightning, and their claws were incomparably sharp as they tore through the air. Every time they swept past him, Qinzong couldn't help but feel chills all over his body. The demonic ice ring attacked again, flying towards one of the corpses. However, the corpse dodged in an instant, and the ring chased after it and trapped it. Qinzong dodged the other corpse's attack and became one with his sword. His sword pierced through the air, and the Starfire Sky Strike slashed towards the corpse trapped by the demonic ice ring. The second 8th level Earth Spirit Realm corpse was killed by Qinzong, and only the 3rd remained. However, Qinzong wasn't happy at all, because he'd used up more than half of his strength. He took out some pills to recover as much of his strength as possible, and dodged the 3rd corpse's attack. Although an 8th level Earth Spirit Realm evil corpse was very strong and gave him quite a bit of pressure, it was still much better than 3 corpses. Chinzong dodged the attacks of the corpses as he took the opportunity to recover his strength. After he'd recovered his strength, he set up the demonic ice ring, drew his sword, and killed. Dozens of corpses had all died, but Chinzong didn't feel relieved. This was because the moment the last corpse died, the hidden gaze once again appeared and fell on Chinzong. Chinzong could feel the gaze, but couldn't find where it was coming from. This made him extremely wary. The gaze became more and more intense, and Chinzong felt as if he was being penetrated. "Come out." Chinzong's voice was low, like the sound of metal clashing, and incomparably sharp. Soon after, light footsteps sounded. Although it was very light, it was very ear-piercing in this silent palace. The sound of the footsteps made Chinzong's muscles tense up involuntarily. The 3 King Earth Vein spirals spun madly, and the tyrannical Earth Vein spirit chi surged endlessly. His essence, energy, and spirit merged into a formless sword force that spread throughout his entire body. The 4th stage of sword force spread around his body, and the 3rd stage of sword intent condensed into a sword shadow above his head. The muscles of his right hand tightened, and his power circulated according to the technique of the small explosion sword art. Along with the sound of footsteps, a black shadow appeared in front of Chinzong. That gaze was extremely sharp, as if it wanted to pierce through Chinzong. In an instant, Chinzong's hair stood on end. A chill ran down his spine, making his hair stand on end. What kind of eyes were those? The stark contrast between black and white was frightening and horrifying. It was as if everything about him had been seen through by this pair of eyes. This extreme feeling of terror made Chinzong lose control. He activated all of his strength in an instant, and the heavenly will sword pierced through the air like a bolt of lightning, tearing through the darkness with unparalleled strength. The black shadow raised a hand and pointed out a finger with a somewhat stiff movement. It seemed slow, but arrived first. With a pop, the sword light shattered and the sword aura dispersed. The frightening strength caused the sword to bend, and then passed through the sword to rush into Chinzong's arm. In an instant, Chinzong felt as if his fingers were about to shatter. The bones in his arm also gave off a mournful cry, and the frightening strength caused his blood and chi to surge. Chinzong wanted to use the strong bamboo and the wind to counterattack, but the strength of this attack was simply too strong. It came in waves like endless waves, and the strength of each wave had reached the limit of the 9th level of the Earth's spirit realm. It continuously whittled away at Chinzong's resistance. Chinzong could only borrow the momentum to fly backwards and dissipate the force of the continuous attacks. Even so, Chinzong still felt pain all over his body, as if his bones were about to fall apart. He was absolutely horrified. What kind of expert was this to be so frightening? Without the slightest hesitation, Chinzong immediately activated the power of the tower. In an instant, all of his essence, chi, and spirit surged into the tower, and then the power of heaven ascension surged out. His strong physique gave Chinzong an even more shocking endurance. The golden power of heaven ascension was like a raging tide that surged and filled Chinzong's body. Chinzong could clearly feel his strength increasing. 7th level of the Earth's spirit realm. 8th level of the Earth's spirit realm. 9th level of the Earth's spirit realm. Extremely wary of the black shadow, Chinzong didn't care about his own body's endurance as he continuously accepted the surging power of heaven ascension. The limit of the 9th level of the Earth's spirit realm. When the power of heaven ascension reached this level, Chinzong felt as if his body was about to explode. Waves of tearing pain spread through his body, as if many blades were cutting him. Chinzong knew that this was the most power he could endure. If this went on, his body would be damaged. The tyrannical and violent power urgently needed to be vented. The power of heaven ascension surged into the heavenly will sword, and as the sword trembled, an extremely frightening sword aura gushed out and pierced through the sky. The first sword strike was as swift as a spark. The second sword strike, Starfire Sky Strike. 2 consecutive strikes struck the black shadow, causing 2 popping sounds to ring out as if bubbles had popped. Chunzong was shocked to discover that the might of the Starfire Strike and Starfire Sky Strike that he deployed with the strength of the Ascension stage had reached an astounding level with his strength at the peak of the 9th level of the Earth Spirit Realm. However, these two sword strikes weren't able to do anything to his opponent. On the contrary, they were easily dispersed. How can he be so strong? Chunzong's eyes widened in disbelief. Wasn't there a power limit in the Gold Spirit's secret realm? His two sword strikes just now were enough to kill an ordinary 9th level of the Earth's Spirit Realm, but they weren't able to do anything to his opponent. Could he be an emperor? Many thoughts flashed through his mind in an instant. The Black Shadow took another step forward and slowly approached, giving Chunzong more and more pressure. Being too focused made Chunzong's eyes sting. Cold sweat unconsciously seeped out of his forehead and slowly slid down. The pressure continued to increase, and when combined with the pain in his body, Chunzong felt even more uncomfortable. Even so, Chunzong didn't dare let down his guard in the slightest. His eyes were still fixed on his opponent, and his consciousness was locked onto his opponent. He didn't even blink when sweat dripped down from the corners of his eyes. The pressure and tension were unprecedented. Chunzong felt a bit helpless in his heart. This Black Shadow was too strong and too frightening. He had no other means to deal with it. Kaneichi? True intent, sword comprehension? He had already activated the power of the Sky Pagoda, so the secret arts and forbidden arts wouldn't be effective. Of course, even if they were effective, he wouldn't be able to withstand the increased power. His body would probably collapse and die before he could even kill his opponent. 10 meters. When the Black Shadow was 10 meters away, the pressure was like a tsunami, causing Chunzong to feel suffocated. Chunzong also saw his opponent's appearance. It was an old man in a black robe with a skinny body. His black and white eyes were staring straight at him. It was extremely frightening. His skin was greenish-gray, the color of the evil corpse. His aura also carried an evil wave, but it wasn't as evil as the evil corpse. It seemed to be mixed with something else. You? The old man's lips moved, and his throat moved along with it. A hoarse and obscure voice came out. It sounded like someone who hadn't drunk water for a long time, causing his throat to be dry. It was a bit harsh and seemed to be difficult because he hadn't spoken for a long time. Was that just displayed the miniature explosion sword art? The more he spoke, the smoother his tone became, but his voice was still so hoarse and obscure. Yes, Chunzong answered, sweat dripping down his face. You, what's your relationship with the Mingjian sect? The skinny old man in the black robe spoke again, and his tone was more fluent. No relationship, Chunzong answered honestly. I obtained the miniature explosion sword art from an evil corpse not long ago. Facing such a strong opponent, Chunzong didn't lie, because it was meaningless. Evil corpse. The skinny old man in the black robe suddenly fell silent, and his aura became increasingly cold and murderous. If it weren't for Chunzong's strong endurance and strong will, he would have fainted under this terrible aura. How long have you obtained the miniature explosion sword art? After a while, the skinny old man in the black robe asked again. Chunzong could hear a trace of undetectable expectation in his voice. About a month. Chunzong answered again. A month, and the miniature explosion swordsmanship has been cultivated to the great mastery. The skinny old man seemed to be immersed in his memories. His clear black and white eyes carried a hint of reminiscence. Even in the famed sword sect, it is difficult to find 3 people with such ability. Chunzong heard it, but he didn't say anything, but he was very surprised. From the skinny old man's words, he could make some inferences. This old man was from the ancient Mingjian sect. Thus, Chunzong was even more shocked. The ancient Mingjian sect had disappeared for a long time and had become history. In the spirit gold secret territory, other than the hundreds of earthly spirits who had just entered, there were only evil corpses and evil spirits. Evil corpses and evil spirits didn't have real spiritual intelligence. This old man obviously had spiritual intelligence. Could it be that he had lived since the ancient times? Thinking of this, Chunzong was inexplicably shocked. Young man, I'm the miniature explosion sword elder of the Mingjian sect. The skinny old man suddenly spoke again and said something that shocked Chunzong. an elder of the Mingjian sect. This was what he had guessed, but seemed to be unexpected. My body is now that of an evil corpse, and I'm only relying on the treasure that protects my spiritual sense to maintain a little bit of my spiritual sense without dissipating. That's why I haven't completely become an evil corpse, the skinny old man said, and his tone was somewhat emotional. Shinzong was surprised by the old man's words, and also by what kind of treasure could preserve the old man's spiritual sense without being eroded and exist until now. However, no matter how good the treasure is, it can't withstand the erosion of time. Now that the treasure's power is gradually losing, my spiritual sense can't exist for too long. The old man continued, when my spiritual sense dissipates, I'll completely become an evil corpse. Shinzong couldn't help but feel a chill down his spine when he thought of the consequences. This old man's strength was incomparably terrifying. If he became an evil corpse, how terrifying would it be? I can't bear to lose my inheritance. You're here because you're fated to be with me. The old man continued, and you've obtained the miniature explosion sword art, which is also fated to be with my Mingjian sect. You're able to cultivate the miniature explosion sword art to the advanced level in a short period of about a month. Your talent is extraordinary. Even at the peak of my Mingjian sect, your talent can be ranked in the top 3. Chapter 929. Inheritance. The inheritance of the elder of the ancient sword sect. One had to know that the ancient famous sword sect was an extremely powerful force. It was not the slightest bit inferior to the current 15 top forces. It was even comparable to the 2 Holy Lands. Its elders were even profound sky realm experts. Moreover, they were not ordinary profound sky realm experts. Many people would be overjoyed if they could get the inheritance. However, Shinzong did not feel overjoyed. Of course, it was inevitable that he would be overjoyed. The ancient sword sect was extremely strong, and their inheritance wasn't weak either. Shinzong reckoned that it was a supreme grade inheritance. However, to Shinzong, who already possessed a supreme grade inheritance and was cultivating a supreme grade cultivation technique, it wasn't that attractive to him. It was definitely attractive. If he could get the inheritance, Shinzong could have a glimpse of the sword principle of the ancient sword sect. It would increase his own accumulation and further improve his sword principle of mind. Thank you for your kindness, but I'm afraid I can't do it, Shinzong replied. He was not so naive after experiencing so much. Who knew if the inheritance was real or fake? Perhaps the inheritance was real, but whether or not he would still be himself after receiving the inheritance was another matter altogether. Besides, he did not really need the inheritance. Between choices, Shinzong chose to refuse. The inheritance of the ancient sword sect is of the highest grade. Why don't you want it? The skinny elder asked. I have too many enemies. I don't know if I can leave this place alive. If the inheritance is given to me, I'm afraid it will be broken. Shinzong replied without hesitation. It doesn't matter. After getting the inheritance, I will transfer my last bit of power to you. It will be enough for your cultivation to improve by leaps and bounds. In addition, I will leave some treasures of the ancient sword sect here. I will tell you one by one. If you take them out, you will be able to protect yourself even if you encounter an expert in the profound heaven realm. The skinny elder said, Come, I don't have much time left. Accept my inheritance and continue the inheritance of the ancient sword sect. Speaking of this, there was a hint of unwillingness in his tone, which made Shinzong feel uneasy. However, before Shinzong could dodge, the skinny old man made his move. Shinzong raised a skinny arm and stretched out his 5 fingers. Suddenly, Shinzong's pupils shrank to the size of needles. The 5 fingers brought along a shocking darkness that enveloped Shinzong. It was like a cage of darkness that enveloped him from all directions, causing Shinzong's heart to palpitate incessantly. He suddenly discovered that he could not dodge. These 5 fingers seemed to be the heavens, the earth, the combination of the heavens and the earth. Seal everything. Chop, chop, chop. Shinzong unleashed all of his power. His heavenly sword went berserk, slashing out in a frenzy. Beams of sword light were terrifying. Qinzong had used up all of his strength, but when those beams of sword light slashed out, they disappeared without a trace. It was as if they had been swallowed up by the dark world, without the slightest splash. Even so, Qinzong continued to slash out and unleash his power. He did not admit defeat. The darkness completely enveloped him. The terrible power came wave after wave, in a continuous way. Between the attacks, it spun like a whirlpool, obliterating all resistance. Qinzong only felt that he could no longer wield his sword. Even if he kept unleashing his power, he could not wield it. The power coming from all directions was too shocking. His limbs could not move, and then even his body could not move. He was completely suppressed. Then, a spot of starlight suddenly appeared in the darkness, like a meteor flying across the dark void. It was magnified in Qinzong's eyes. As he got closer, Qinzong was able to clearly see that it wasn't starlight, but a speck of spiritual light. Within that spiritual light, Qinzong saw a blurry old face. It was the skinny old man's face. This spiritual light was the last bit of the skinny old man's spiritual sense and will. There was no way to avoid it. This spiritual light directly penetrated Qinzong's glabella and entered his sea of consciousness. With a roar, as if thousands of thunderbolts had exploded in his sea of consciousness, Qinzong felt dizzy and his sea of consciousness was in turmoil. The skinny face in the spiritual light suddenly became clear. Soon, it condensed into a complete body, as if the skinny old man had directly entered Qinzong's sea of consciousness. But Qinzong knew that it was not the skinny old man himself, but the condensation of his spiritual sense and will. It was just a little bit of spiritual sense and will left from the antiquity times, but it was able to condense into a complete body. It was hard to imagine how powerful he must have been in his heyday. He must have been an expert in the advanced stage of the heavenly profound realm, or even at the limit of the heavenly profound realm. It should be noted that this little bit of spiritual sense, and what was not even 1%, or even 1,000th, of his heyday, but it was enough to make Qinzong feel a great threat. Frightening, truly frightening. Without any hesitation, Qinzong stopped activating the Tower of Ascension. The power of Ascension flowed back into the Tower of Ascension at an astonishing speed. Soon after, Qinzong's own power also quickly spread out from the Tower of Ascension. In just a short period of time, Qinzong had consumed half of his essence, qi, and spirit. His spiritual sense gathered and condensed into a figure in his sea of consciousness. It was Qinzong's figure, but it was not as solid as the skinny old man's. Because of activating the power of the Tower of Ascension, Qinzong's spiritual sense had been consumed by half. Condensed body of spiritual sense. I didn't expect your spiritual sense to be so powerful. The skinny old man's spiritual sense said with a bit of surprise. Condensed body of spiritual sense was something that could only be done if the spiritual sense was strong and pure enough. Most earthly spirit realm cultivators could not do it, but Qinzong could. It was enough to show the strength of his spiritual sense. Although it did not look as solid, it was still more powerful than many earthly spirit realm cultivators. For a moment, the skinny old man, the exploding sword elder, was overjoyed. Outstanding talent, strong physique, and powerful spiritual sense were all advantages. When combined, it was even more amazing. Even during the famed sword sex heyday, it would have been ranked first. Thinking of this, the exploding sword elder could not help but laugh heartily. His goal was not really to pass down the inheritance to Qinzong, but to occupy Qinzong's body and cultivate again to reach the peak. Naturally, it was best for him to inherit the famed sword sex inheritance. Qinzong's talent was so amazing that it was beyond his expectations. At the same time, it made him even more ecstatic. If such talent became his body, he would be able to surpass the past and reach a higher level. It would not be difficult for him to become an emperor. Before you die, I'll let you see the supreme sword art of the famed sword sect. The old man shouted. His spiritual sense stretched out and grasped. A light extended and condensed into a long sword. The sword of spiritual sense. Qinzong's relatively illusory body of spiritual sense also extended a long sword. The old man stabbed. The sword did not seem to be fast, but there was an indescribable feeling. It was as if it had penetrated time and space in an instant, ignoring all distance, and directly appeared in front of Chinzong. It was horrifying. He had never heard of such a sword art. The supreme sword art of the ancient famed sword sect is so powerful and mysterious. In addition to being horrified, Chinzong also reacted quickly. In the sea of consciousness, the spiritual sense body's reaction was more direct and faster than the flesh and blood body. After all, the flesh and blood body was the carrier, while the spiritual sense mind was the dominant one. It required a process and some time to transmit information through the spiritual sense mind and control the flesh and blood body to make all kinds of reactions. The more powerful the person, the faster the time and the faster the reaction. However, the spiritual sense mind was different from the flesh and blood body. No matter how powerful the spiritual sense mind was, it could shorten the time infinitely. However, no matter how short the time was, it still needed some time. However, the spiritual sense body was different. It did not need time and could react in an instant. It was extremely fast. With a swing of a sword, the scar of heaven cut through the air. In the sea of consciousness, swinging the sword with the spiritual sense body was not only faster, but also more condensed. This made Chinzong have an inexplicable understanding. However, this kind of understanding was too simple. It was like a flash in the pan and disappeared in an instant. Also, because of the pressing time, Chinzong did not have enough time to grasp it. The two swords collided again and again in the sea of consciousness. Chinzong tried his best to perform his sword art to the extreme. The sword art performed by the spiritual sense body was different from the sword art performed by the flesh and blood body. Because there was no spiritual power or strength to support it, it was only a pure sword art. There were skills and there were skills. It could not be just skills. The extreme of skills was endless changes. Good. The exploding sword elder could not help but be surprised by Chinzong's sword art. Previously, when he tested with the evil corpse, he could see that Chinzong's sword art was very exquisite. It was much better than his peers. Even in the Mingjian sect, he was one of the best. But now, after the confrontation in the sea of consciousness, he clearly realized that this person's sword art was exquisite beyond imagination. It was almost on par with him. He could see that this person was less than 50 years old, while he had been immersed in the way of the sword for thousands of years. What a terrifying talent. However, the higher the talent, the better. Therefore, from now on, this body would belong to him. The amazing talent and potential of this body would belong to him. At that time, not only would he be an emperor, but he would also have a chance to become a half-saint. Thinking of this, the exploding sword elder felt a burst of passion and his sword became more and more fierce. The supreme sword art of the Mingjian sect was indeed extraordinary. Its exquisiteness far surpassed all the sword arts Chinzong knew. Even the sword arts of the heavenly sword principle could not compare. Of course, this did not mean that the heavenly sword principle was inferior to the supreme sword art of the Mingjian sect. It was just that the emphasis was different. The heavenly sword principle was more focused on direct power. It was unparalleled and could destroy anything. It was slightly inferior in terms of skills and changes. On the other hand, the supreme sword art of the Mingjian sect was more focused on skills and changes. It was incomparably profound. Of course, in terms of direct damage, it was not as good as the heavenly sword principle. Every time the exploding sword elder attacked, there seemed to be endless changes. It could easily evolve into other sword moves. It was difficult to guard against and difficult to deal with. Chinzong was restrained in an instant. His opponent controlled the rhythm. In the past, when he fought with others, Chinzong gradually controlled the rhythm. This was the first time that his rhythm was controlled by someone else. He was brought into the opponent's rhythm. He could not help but be shocked. However, Chinzong was not discouraged or afraid. Instead, he went along with his opponent's rhythm. He wholeheartedly experienced the mysteries of his opponent's sword art. He first got used to it, then slowly tried to understand it. Chapter 930. The sword light was endless, like mountains and rivers, like floating clouds in the sky, containing infinite mysteries. Qinzong was horrified by this move. He felt like he was trapped in a maze and couldn't find a way out. He waved his sword. Cut, cut, cut. Qinzong exerted all his strength and unleashed all his attacks. Finally, he managed to break free from the influence of the sword. However, he only saw a sharp sword light that seemed to pierce through the void. Qinzong didn't have time to dodge. His shoulder was pierced by the sword. An indescribable pain suddenly swept over him like a tide. In the sea of consciousness, the body of soul sense wielded the sword faster. But at the same time, the pain caused by the attack was more intense. Under the sharp pain, Qinzong instantly lost his balance. In an instant, his opponent waved his sword again and hit Qinzong's body of soul sense. Qinzong's soul sense had been half consumed, so he was not as strong as his peak state. The exploding sword elder used to be an expert at the limit of the Tianxian realm. He had been immersed in swordsmanship for thousands of years. He was better than Qinzong in all aspects. If Qinzong hadn't been tough enough, he would have been defeated. But if he continued, he could only hold on for a while. Qinzong tried his best to resist while thinking about how to deal with it. Rely on the power of the sky-reaching tower? Qinzong didn't know if it was possible. After all, although he had refined the sky-reaching tower, to be honest, he didn't know much about it. It was a semi-divine weapon. Whether in power or mystery, it was far better than a super-spiritual weapon. Qinzong's cultivation was too low, so he could only exert part of its power, or rely on the power of the heart sword seal. Qinzong thought of another idea. In the past, when threats entered his sea of consciousness, he relied on the heart sword seal to get through the crisis. From his point of view, the heart sword seal seemed to be more reliable. But at that time, the heart sword seal was passive. Could it take the initiative? Qinzong didn't know, but he had to try. His mind fell on the heart sword seal in the center of his sea of consciousness. He communicated with it and conveyed his thoughts with some expectation and anxiety. To Qinzong's delight, the heart sword seal actually responded. In an instant, a breath of aura spread out from the heart sword seal and entered Qinzong's broken body of spiritual sense. Then, it quickly spread to the sword of spiritual sense in his hand. The sword of soul sense was swung out naturally, as if it was guided by something in the dark. It was completely out of Qinzong's control. At this moment, it was not Qinzong who drew his sword, but the sword that guided Qinzong. Like a sudden impulse, like a stroke of genius, this sword was filled with endless profoundness, and this profoundness did not only lie in its transformations. In an instant, Qinzong seemed to see an ancient figure wielding a sword. An indescribable feeling filled his whole body, and Qinzong was completely immersed in it. This sword seemed to transcend time and space. A single sword was eternal and everlasting. The exploding sword elder was stunned. That sword seemed ordinary, but it felt like it was aimed at one's soul. It was locked on, and there was no way to dodge it. It even gave one a feeling of being unable to block it. Under this sword, even one's mind seemed to be frozen. While being shocked, the exploding sword elder reacted quickly, but he was still a bit late. That sword broke through the air and was extremely mysterious. It stabbed silently and pierced through the exploding sword elder's glabella. The body of spiritual sense had no so-called vital points. Thus, even if it was pierced between the eyebrows, it would not die. However, the sword contained a strange and terrifying power. It started from between the eyebrows of the elder's body of spiritual sense and quickly spread out like lightning. The exploding sword elder could only let out a miserable cry. His mind and the body of spiritual sense collapsed directly. Immediately, the heart sword seal released a suction force and directly absorbed the exploding sword elder's body of spiritual sense after it collapsed. Before Qinzong could react, the heart sword seal shot out a bit of spiritual light and infused it into the body of spiritual sense of Qinzong. The broken body of spiritual sense recovered quickly. His consumed spiritual sense also quickly recovered to the peak and seemed to be strengthened. However, that was not the most important thing. The most important thing was that the spiritual light shot out by the heart sword seal contained a bit of memory of the exploding sword elder of the Mingjian sect. There were not many memories, but they were all essences. The essence of the Tao of Sword was absorbed by Qinzong. It seemed like a long time had passed. Chinzong finally absorbed the exploding sword elder's memory completely. Although he could not completely grasp the essence of the Tao of Sword, he had grasped a part of it. Imperceptibly, Chinzong's accumulation of the Tao of Sword increased a lot and became more vigorous. As soon as he thought about it, many inspirations about the Tao of Sword appeared in his mind. Although it was only a part of his memory, the exploding sword elder was an expert at the limit of the profound sky realm who had lived for more than 1,000 years. No, in terms of age, he had lived for more than 1,000 years. He had lived for tens of thousands of years since the antiquity times. Even though he had practiced swordsmanship for more than 1,000 years, he had also been thinking about the mystery of the Tao of Sword when he became an evil corpse. Imperceptibly, he had accumulated a lot of knowledge. Even though it was only a part of it, it was still a huge amount. It was even more than Chun Zong's own accumulation. When I completely absorb these memories, there will be a new change in the Tao of Sword. Chun Zong thought to himself. He could not help but feel a little excited. Whether it was the treasure or the spiritual gold, he was happy. However, compared with the improvement of the Tao of Sword, it was not important. The Tao of Sword was his real pursuit, his greatest pursuit. Without the support of the exploding sword elder, Chun Zong could easily open the closed door. However, Chun Zong did not rush to open it. Instead, he quickly took a virtual ring from the exploding sword elder's corpse. After refining it and recognizing it as its owner, Chun Zong's face unconsciously showed a touch of joy. Middle grade, virtual ring. It was one grade higher than the virtual ring he was using now. Naturally, the space inside was also several times larger. Most importantly, this middle grade virtual ring was still intact. Chun Zong guessed that this elder the sword gate had not completely turned into an evil corpse, and he still had his consciousness and was left behind. He must have tried his best to preserve the spirituality of the void ring, but the price he had to pay was probably the depletion of the spiritual source, because Chun Zong did not find any spiritual source in the ring. Not only was there no spiritual origin, Chun Zong also did not see any spiritual herbs or elixirs. However, it was not empty. There were 3 things in it. The first thing was a sword, a long sword in a scabbard. The scabbard was red and hollow, as if it was woven and solidified by flames. As for the sword, Chun Zong had not drawn it out, so he did not know what it looked like. However, judging from its aura, Chun Zong knew that it was an upper-grade spiritual sword. This sword should be the exploding sword elder's sword. The second thing made Chun Zong's eyes shine. Spiritual gold, or, with a single glance, Chun Zong counted them clearly. There were a total of 380 spirit gold ores. Each spirit gold ore was about the size of a human head. There was not much difference between them. Obviously, they had been carefully selected. Although he did not know how much spiritual gold could be extracted from 380 spiritual gold ores, Chun Zong was still very excited. The third thing shocked Chun Zong directly. Spiritual gold. The refined spiritual gold was the size of a grain of rice. After counting, Chun Zong found that there were more than 5 kilograms of spiritual gold. 5 kilograms of spiritual gold. What did this mean? It meant that he could upgrade 100 low-grade spiritual weapons to middle-grade spiritual weapons. Of course, this was not a big deal. The point was that he could upgrade 10 middle-grade spiritual weapons to upper-grade spiritual weapons. If he wanted to upgrade upper-grade spiritual weapons to supreme-grade spiritual weapons, it was far from enough. He would need 50 kilograms of spiritual gold. Of course, if he had supreme-grade spiritual weapons, with his current cultivation, Chun Zong would not be able to exert much of their power. Moreover, it would bring great disaster to himself. With 5 kilograms of spiritual gold, I can upgrade my devil-slaying device to upper-grade spiritual weapons. The thought flashed through his mind. The devil-slaying device was a middle-grade spiritual weapon obtained from the devil-slaying division. It provided Chun Zong with a lot of protection. If it could be upgraded to upper-grade spiritual weapons, its defensive power would be even stronger. The Frost Devil Ring can also be upgraded to upper-grade spiritual weapons. Chun Zong thought again. The Frost Devil Ring was a top-notch middle-grade spiritual weapon. If it was upgraded to upper-grade spiritual weapons, its power would be obviously increased and it would be more useful to him. The middle-grade inner armor I am wearing can also be upgraded to upper-grade spiritual armor. Then, Chunzong could not think of anything to upgrade. However, if he could upgrade these 3 middle-grade spiritual weapons to upper-grade spiritual weapons, his overall strength would be greatly improved. Now that there were 2 strong enemies who could come to him at any time, he should upgrade as much as possible. Thinking of this, Chunzong did not leave. He blocked the closed door as much as possible and began to melt the spiritual gold to upgrade the 3 middle-grade spiritual weapons. After a period of time, the Cold Ice Demonic Ring was upgraded to a high-grade spirit tool. The ice blue color became deeper and deeper. The sore mark that Chunzong had left on it also disappeared. Moreover, strands of cold air diffused out from the Cold Ice Demonic Ring and pervaded the surroundings. Countless ice frost condensed. With the Frost Devil Ring as the center, the area within a radius of a few meters was covered by a shocking cold air. Chunzong waved his hand and the Frost Devil Ring turned into a ring on his left index finger. The shocking cold air was quickly restrained. The second upgrade was the Devil Slaying Device. When Chunzong melted the spiritual gold to upgrade the Devil Slaying Device, the closed door of the palace was pushed hard and began to shake. Chunzong frowned but did not stop. The spiritual gold had been melted and covered the Devil Slaying Device. It was slowly seeping into the Devil Slaying Device to upgrade it. This process could not be interrupted. With 2 booming sounds, the door was hit by a huge force and cracked open. The next moment, the door was directly blasted open and a figure appeared in front of Chunzong. At the same time, the figure's sharp eyes were fixed on Chunzong. The exploding sword elder was dead, and the darkness in the palace disappeared. It did not affect one's vision at all. Immediately, the person who blasted open the door was stunned at first. Then, his face was full of surprise and excitement. Chapter 9:31. Killing intent swept forth like a hurricane, incomparably terrifying. His strength of the 8th level of the Earth's spirit realm exploded in an instant, all for the sake of killing Chunzong in an instant and seizing the black robe that was continuously absorbing spirit gold. The aura emanating from the black robe shocked him, as it had already surpassed a mid-rank spirit weapon. If it surpassed a mid-rank spirit weapon, then wouldn't it become an upper-rank spirit weapon? When he thought of this, the 8th level of the Earth's spirit realm from the School of Battle was quite excited. He'd never owned an upper-rank spirit weapon since he'd started cultivating. His goal in entering the secret realm had been quite direct, and that was to find enough spirit gold or an even spirit gold to upgrade his mid-rank spirit weapon to an upper-rank spirit weapon. However, he'd only found a dozen spirit gold ores up until now, and didn't know when he'd be able to find enough to upgrade a mid-rank spirit weapon to an upper-rank spirit weapon. Who would have thought that he'd see a mid-rank spirit weapon upgrade to an upper-rank spirit weapon now? Even though the upper-rank spirit weapon that was about to be upgraded was a long robe, it wasn't bad either. At the very least, he could trade it for an upper-rank spirit weapon that he needed if he didn't want to use it. He traversed the short distance of a few dozen meters in an instant, but his thoughts were even faster as several thoughts flashed through his mind. He raised his right hand and clenched his fingers into a fist. Terrifying spirit power from the earth veins filled his fist as it smashed down like a meteor. The air was compressed beneath the fist, causing it to seem as if a white umbrella had enveloped it. Before this punch could strike Chunzong, a wave of shocking chilliness immediately spread from the front. Immediately, one could see an icy blue figure cutting through the air and shooting over. The frightening chill had come from the icy blue shadow. Lock on Magnify. Unable to dodge, the demonic ring of ice immediately trapped the 8th level of the School of Battle. Before he'd even reached Chunzong, the 8th level of the School of Battle fell from the sky as a shocking chill spread out from his body. If it had only been a mid-rank spirit weapon, the chill wouldn't have spread so quickly and would have even failed under the opponent's resistance. However, This was an upper-rank spirit weapon, the demonic ring of ice. His heart was filled with horror. He continuously mustered his strength to resist the spread of the cold chi. At the same time, he continuously unleashed his strength in an attempt to break the ice demonic ring. However, the frost demonic ring had been upgraded to a high-grade spiritual artifact, and its power had increased greatly. Just as he was resisting the power of the cold, ice demonic ring, a beam of sword light pierced through the air, shooting toward him like an aurora. The aurora was like a wisp of starfire, extremely dazzling. The starfire sword technique was as swift as a starfire. The starfire pierced through the air and penetrated the space between his eyebrows. Soon after, an intense pain spread from the space between his eyebrows to his entire brain. His brain was directly burned to ashes by the blazing high temperature. After killing his opponent, the icy demonic ring transformed back into a small ring on his left index finger, and the heavenly will sword returned to its scabbard. At this moment, the Devil Slayer device had finally absorbed all of the spiritual gold liquid. A powerful aura swept out from the Devil Slayer device like a storm. The terrifying aura was like a hurricane. Qinzong hurriedly exerted his strength to isolate the aura as much as possible. Then, Qinzong put on the Devil Slayer device. At the same time, he restrained the aura of the Devil Slayer device to prevent others from discovering that it was a high-grade spiritual artifact. The last thing to be upgraded was the inner armor. However, the gate of the palace had been broken. Although the battle had been very short, the aura fluctuations had spread out. It was difficult to guarantee that no one would find it. Qinzong could only temporarily put aside the idea of upgrading the inner armor. He quickly packed up and took the void ring of the man he had killed. It was a low-grade void ring with many things. However, Qinzong was most concerned about the dozen pieces of spiritual gold ores. Although it was insignificant compared to the spiritual gold ores he had now, it was better than nothing. Entering the palace this time could be regarded as a narrow escape. However, as the saying goes, one who survives a great disaster is bound to have good fortune later. His harvest was also very amazing. Although Qinzong did not know how the other's harvest was, he was more or less sure that his harvest must be among the top. Even if he left the spiritual gold secret realm now, Qinzong would not have any regrets. His cultivation of the way of body refining had increased, his strength had increased, he had obtained spiritual gold ores to upgrade his spiritual artifact to high grade, and he had also obtained a real high-grade spiritual sword. This was the high-grade spiritual sword from the exploding sword elder. Qinzong pulled it out. Suddenly, a blazing aura surged out. The aura was not only as hot as a raging flame, but also as sharp as a knife. Near the crossguard of the sword, there was a simple and vigorous word. The word was like a burning flame. At a glance, Qinzong felt his eyes burning. Then, the heat spread to every part of his body. A top-notch high-grade spiritual weapon. Qinzong was shocked. The Heavenly Will Sword was a middle-grade spiritual weapon, but its power had reached the level of a high-grade spiritual weapon. However, it could only be regarded as an ordinary high-grade spiritual weapon. Even so, it was already very strong. However, this unknown sword was a top-notch high-grade spiritual weapon. It was even more powerful than the Heavenly Will Sword. With a thought, Qinzong stabbed out with the sword. The blade could not be seen, but it seemed as if a red star flew out. So fast. Qinzong's pupils shrank. He was secretly shocked. The sword that he had just displayed was the first move of the Starfire sword technique, Rapid Starfire. Its speed was about 10% faster than the Heavenly Will Sword. 10%. For a sword move like Rapid Starfire, which focused on speed, the improvement was very obvious. It was not only a small improvement, but its power had also increased by 50%. 30% of the increase was due to the difference in power between a top-notch high-grade spiritual sword and an ordinary one. The other 20% was due to the blazing power of the sword itself. In total, the increase was 50%. Rapid Starfire was a sword move that focused on speed. After the increase, its power was even greater than the Starfire Sky Attack. Of course, if the Starfire Sky Attack was displayed with this sword, its power would also be increased by 50%. it would be even more terrifying. This sword is suitable for the Starfire sword technique. Let's call it the Starfire spiritual sword, Chunzong said to himself. He did not know the original name of this sword. It was not in the memory fragments of the exploding sword elder. So, he named it himself, because this sword now belonged to him. The Starfire spiritual sword is a top-notch high-grade spiritual sword. It means a lot. I can't let others know about it, Chunzong said to himself. In the Taiyuan Heaven sect, his master, the master of the Green Feather Mountain, used a top-notch high-grade spiritual weapon. It was the inherited treasure of the Green Feather Mountain. From this, one could see how precious and rare top-notch high-grade spiritual weapons were. If others knew that he had a top-notch high-grade spiritual sword, many late-stage profound sky realm experts would probably attack him regardless of their status. Even if he only had a few ordinary top-notch spiritual weapons, it would bring him a lot of trouble if others knew about it. Since he could not let others know about the Starfire spiritual sword, he could only keep it in his void ring. He would only use it when he encountered a powerful enemy. At that time, he would have to kill the enemy. Otherwise, the news would be leaked and endless trouble would follow. After calming down quickly, Chunzong's body flashed and disappeared instantly. When he reappeared, he was already 100,000 meters away. He used the Earth shrinking technique to quickly leave the famed sword sect's encampment. Perhaps there were still a few well-preserved palaces that he had not entered, but he had not come here alone. Moreover, he had already obtained great benefits, so it was better for him to leave first. It would be best for him to find a place to upgrade his middle-grade spiritual armor to a high-grade spiritual armor. The Spirit Gold Secret Realm was vast and could rival the Bright Sword Continent. It would not be easy for hundreds of Earth Spirit Realm experts to meet each other inside, not to mention when they were intentionally hiding. Chunzong hid himself and found a relatively safe and secret place. He began to use the spiritual gold to upgrade the spirituality and power of the middle-grade spiritual armor to the upper-grade spiritual armor. Then, he suppressed its aura to prevent it from leaking out and being detected by others. The demonic ice ring, the devil execution armor, and the inner armor are all top-notch spiritual weapons. Even if I suppress their auras, they will still leak out as soon as I make a move. With the three top-notch spiritual weapons on him, Chunzong couldn't help but think. Moreover, some experts have very sharp senses. It's hard to guarantee that they will have other methods to sense it. This is another big problem. Thinking of this, Chunzong couldn't help but make up his mind. He first put the devil execution armor and the demonic ice ring into the void ring, so that they would not be easily discovered. As for the top-notch spiritual armor, Chunzong was still confident that he could completely suppress and lock onto the aura of a top-notch spiritual weapon. As long as the battle was not too intense, he would not let the aura leak out. Of course, if the battle was too intense, he would have to use the other top-notch spiritual weapons. He might even have to use the Starfire sword. There was no need to consider whether the aura would leak out or not. After putting the devil execution armor and the demonic ice ring into the void ring, Chunzong couldn't help but let out a sigh of relief. Completely suppressing the aura of three top-notch spiritual weapons was indeed quite a bit of pressure for him. Now that he had put away two of them, the pressure had decreased sharply, and he could easily bear it. Now, even if I meet those two experts from the 9-Star Sky Sect and Skyscraper Association again, I don't have to worry about them one-on-one. Chunzong thought to himself. After activating the power of the Sky Pagoda and reaching the peak of the 9th level of the Earth Spirit Realm, Chunzong was confident that he would be able to fight and even kill his opponents with the help of the three top-notch spiritual weapons and a top-notch spiritual sword. Of course, his opponents were experts at the peak of the Earth's spirit realm. Their strength was strong and their methods were extraordinary. They would certainly have hidden trump cards. Chunzong would not underestimate them. Time passed slowly, day after day. While Chunzong was constantly searching for spirit gold, ores, he was also constantly absorbing the memories of the exploding sword elder in his sea of consciousness. The quintessence of the way of the sword was gradually absorbed and mastered by Chunzong. Imperceptibly, Chunzong's accumulation on the way of the sword was becoming more and more vigorous. Gradually, Chunzong felt that his accumulation on the way of the sword was about to reach a new height. And after reaching this new height, there would be an obvious change. This change would often appear as the creation of new sword moves. Not only that, but the various original sword moves would also be perfected, and there would be obvious improvements in all aspects. Chapter 932. The reddish-gray airflow swept across the sky like a storm, and the doomsday aura seemed to have intensified. Under the oppressive sky, on the barren land that was like a ruin, a tall figure suddenly jumped up, leaping hundreds of meters into the air, drawing a violent arc, like a meteor falling from the sky, mighty and mighty. Chunzong narrowed his eyes and stared at the ferocious figure. The terrifying aura had already locked onto him. An invisible force pressed down on him from all directions. It was like an invisible hand was clenching tightly, trying to crush Chunzong's body. This was a pure suppression of momentum, but it was nothing for Chunzong. The tall figure fell rapidly, and the pressure was getting stronger and stronger. Cracks appeared on the ground below. With a thunderous boom, this towering figure mercilessly blasted towards Chunzong. It was like a meteor, bringing with it a terrifying force that could sink the earth. The aura became more and more condensed, like a giant cannon bombarding, making Chunzong feel suffocated. His robe and black hair fluttered, but Chunzong's eyes were getting brighter, and there seemed to be sword shadows condensing in his pupils. In a flash, an amazing beam of sword light flashed and turned into a ball of blazing starfire, breaking through the air. Starfire Sky Attack. This sword seemed to be able to break the sky. In the blink of an eye, the Starfire Sky Attack crossed hundreds of meters and collided with the domineering figure falling from the sky. At the same time, Chunzong appeared tens of thousands of meters away by shrinking the ground. With an earth-shattering boom, the sky shook and the earth shook. The horrible aura blasted out, and the void seemed to be shattered. The amazing power hit the ground, and the earth cracked and shattered. Countless pieces of soil splashed up. In the blink of an eye, a crater hundreds of meters deep appeared on the ground, surrounded by shocking cracks. The horrible aura continued to bombard and roll, like a huge wave, and covered an area of 10,000 meters in an instant. A layer of the ground was scraped up. Even Chunzong, who was 10,000 meters away, was blown by the strong wind, and his robe was shaking. With a dong sound, that tall and sturdy figure landed on the ground. It was none other than the Skyscraper Society's stalwart expert. He was furious, and his tiger-like eyes stared at Chunzong. His terrifying, killing intent and hatred overflowed into the heavens. In the Ninth Spirit Gold Mine, Chunzong had snatched food from the tiger's mouth and killed one of the Motyan Association's disciples, the Sword Marquis of Icy Hell Fein Yosia. He must die. An extremely terrifying aura blasted out, sweeping up tens of thousands of airwaves. Dust and dirt flew everywhere, as if a smoky dragon was attacking. In the blink of an eye, Chunzong activated the power of the Sky Tower. The overbearing power of the Sky Tower penetrated into his body like an unstoppable torrent, causing Chunzong's body to vibrate continuously. His bones and muscles were filled with astonishing power, and an explosive power spread throughout his body. His astonishing aura oppressed the surroundings, creating layers of ripples. With a boom, the ground beneath his feet shattered, the limit of the 9th level of the Earth's spirit realm. Chunzong felt as if he could destroy a mountain with a single move. Die! The Skyscraper Society's stalwart expert was wearing a translucent golden glove. He clenched his fist and stretched his right arm backward, like a bow stretched to its limit. Along with a roar filled with hatred and killing intent, a golden light passed through his arm and gathered on his fist. Boom! The heavens and the earth shook. The fist energy was like a tiger, extremely ferocious. Chunzong's eyes were slightly serious, but there was also a trace of excitement. Without a doubt, this man was a well-deserved expert in the Earth Spirit realm. Putting everything else aside, to be able to fight with such an expert was undoubtedly a very exciting thing. Taking a deep breath, Chunzong swung his sword. Without dodging, his sword sliced through the air. Fight! Fight! In a flash, Chunzong and the Skyscraper Society's expert were engaged in a fierce battle. The sword energy of the Heavenly Will Sword had the power of an upper-rank spiritual weapon. Although the glove of the Skyscraper Society's expert wasn't an upper-rank spiritual weapon, it was still a top mid-rank spiritual weapon. It had absorbed some spiritual gold and was infinitely close to an upper-rank spiritual weapon. Its power wasn't weak either. In particular, this man's martial arts were exquisite. Every move of his contained a frightening aura, as if it could destroy a mountain. Every punch he threw out caused the air to tremble, as if the entire world was shaking. Compared to that day, Chunzong could feel that this man's strength had improved by leaps and bounds. However, if he could benefit from the increase in his strength, others could also benefit from it and improve their own strength. With a change of thought, Chunzong swung his sword wholeheartedly and engaged in a fierce battle with his opponent. This battle was for no other reason than to kill his opponent. The Skyscraper Society's expert wanted to kill Chunzong, but Chunzong also wanted to kill him. If it was before, Chunzong would naturally run away as soon as he saw his opponent. After all, he was no match for him. However, it was different now. His increased strength had brought him greater confidence. In close combat, Chunzong not only resisted all of his opponent's attacks with his sword in hand, but also counterattacked constantly. Chunzong had also performed the strong bamboo in the wind technique to the extreme. When he struck out with his sword, he could use the strong bamboo in the wind technique to attack with 3 layers of force, making it even more difficult for the experts of the Skyscraper Association to resist. Both of his fists were airtight, blocking all of Chunzong's attacks. The Skyscraper Society's expert's face was incomparably solemn. It hadn't been long, but his opponent had already gained the strength to fight against him. This was too frightening. Thinking of this, a trace of ruthlessness flashed through the eyes of the Skyscraper Society's expert. He raised his left palm and slapped it on his chest 10 times each. Each slap produced a rumbling sound. The air rippled like water, overlapping each other in a continuous manner. The aura of the Skyscraper Society's expert continued to rise with each slap. After the 10 slaps, the Skyscraper Society's aura suddenly increased by 50%. With a punch, the air rippled like water. The terrifying punch seemed to be able to shatter a mountain. Chunzong's face suddenly changed. The power of this punch was much more powerful than before, more than 50%. With this punch, the air was completely repelled, turning the surroundings into a vacuum. It was suffocating and oppressive, as if it was about to be crushed. As the fist approached, it rapidly enlarged in front of Chunzong's eyes, filling up the world in front of him. This punch seemed to be able to collapse the sky. Chunzong was shocked, but he also had a trace of indescribable excitement. Chunzong still didn't dodge. Instead, he swung his sword. With a boom, a blazing starfire broke through the sky, extremely dazzling. Starfire Sky Attack. Chunzong had performed the miniature explosion sword art. Because he had obtained part of the miniature explosion sword art's memory, the essence of the sword art had not only increased Chunzong's accumulation, but also allowed Chunzong to cultivate the miniature explosion sword art to its current level at a faster speed. The highest level, the consummate level. The consummate level of the miniature explosion sword art could increase its power by 50%. After its power was increased by 50%, the Starfire Sky Attack became even more terrifying. There was a loud boom, as if a supernova had exploded. Terrifying blazing rings of stars exploded from the point of contact between the sword and the fist. Layers of rings of stars surged and tore the sky apart, revealing a shadow that made one's heart palpitate. The Skyscraper Society's expert was shocked. He hadn't expected that his opponent could still resist his attack even after he had performed the secret method to increase his power by 50%. It was terrifying. It was a great threat. He had to get rid of it as soon as possible. Under the powerful impact, Chunzong felt his pure yang qi and blood surging. Fortunately, he had a good cultivation in the Tao of body refining, so he was able to withstand the counterforce. The Skyscraper Society's expert also had a good attainment in body refining. Although he was not as good as Chunzong, he was able to withstand the counterforce with what he had learned. With a leap, Qinzong pounced forward, his long sword piercing through the sky. He performed the sword art of will and the starfire sword art alternately, constantly defending and attacking. The Skyscraper Society's expert also used all his means. His fists, legs, and even his body could be transformed into terrifying sharp weapons, launching a terrifying attack on Qinzong. In terms of cultivation time, the Skyscraper Society's expert was no doubt much better than Qinzong, more than 100 years. Therefore, his means were more abundant, and his every movement was full of mysteries. Qinzong was not bad either. With his extraordinary talent and the accumulation of his consciousness, Qinzong's foundation was not inferior to his opponents. In fact, his foundation was even better than his opponents. However, there was still a gap in terms of means. However, Qinzong only used 2 sword arts to neutralize all of his opponent's means. The battle was extremely fierce. As the battle continued, the essence of the Tao of Sword contained in the exploding Sword Elder's memory fragments was constantly being absorbed by Qinzong. Unknowingly, Qinzong's sword arts also revealed some techniques that did not belong to him. However, after using them, these techniques would become Qinzong's own. The Skyscraper Society's expert suddenly realized that his opponent's sword arts had begun to change slightly. This slight change made his sword arts more flexible, and more elusive. During the fierce battle, Qinzong swung his sword countless times. Under the intense pressure and battle, Qinzong finally completely absorbed all of the exploding Sword Elder's Tao of sword memories for his own use. In an instant, countless comprehensions appeared in his mind. It was as if there were countless figures holding swords and constantly swinging them. Each figure swung a different sword. Even if they swung from the same angle, there would be many subtle differences. Under the surging light, Qinzong seemed to have gained enlightenment. He was suddenly startled and stood still. Good chance. Seeing this, the Skyscraper Society's expert's eyes flashed with a fierce light. No matter why his opponent suddenly stopped moving, he would not let go of this opportunity. He immediately condensed an incomparably tyrannical power and poured it all into his fist. In an instant, he punched. This punch was extremely powerful, and its power was unparalleled. It was as if it could shatter an ancient mountain with a single punch, or sink a continent with a single punch. He believed that as long as his fist landed, his opponent would undoubtedly die. He could even imagine the scene of his opponent's body exploding under his fist. It was incomparably satisfying. The terrifying punch directly crushed the air as it blasted toward Qinzong. The moment the punch was about to land on Qinzong, Qinzong moved. At this moment, his subconscious mind was completely controlling his body. He swung his sword, drawing countless circles. The air rippled like water, and the ferocious punch suddenly paused, as if it had sunk into a quagmire. It was met with layers of resistance, and its speed gradually slowed down. Break for me. The Skyscraper Society's expert was startled and angry. He erupted his power a second time, increasing the power of his punch. However, doing so placed a great burden on his body. Chapter 9:33. The sword light was like a whirlpool, dispersing the Mautian Society's powerful attacks one by one. In the end, the sword flicked upwards, guiding the opponent's punch upwards. Rumble. The power of the fist and the sword light mixed together, soaring into the sky like a dragon emerging from the abyss. Its power was astonishing. The Mautian Society's expert couldn't help but change his expression. His all-out punch had been dispelled by Qinzong in such a way. The sword light whirlpool didn't seem to be strong, but it was endless and flexible. It was like falling into a spider's web, difficult to struggle. This sword had also allowed Qinzong's accumulation of the sword path to erupt in an instant. His subconsciousness emerged and transformed into consciousness. His originally empty eyes suddenly shone with a bright light. Countless sword lights flickered in his eyes. Countless sword shadows condensed and appeared as if they were about to shoot out. My own sword turns into 1,000 mountains, floats on 10,000 rivers. A low voice seemed to come from the void outside the sky, but also from the depths of the soul. A unique rhythm pervaded around his body and slowly spread out. As if it had been accumulating and brewing for an eternity, Qinzong swung his sword. This sword seemed to stab forward, yet also seemed to slice, yet also seemed to chop, slash, flick, and lift. There were many different sword styles, techniques, and variations contained within this one sword strike. This sword seemed to have integrated Qinzong's mastery of the sword into it. And it was indeed so. This sword was the condensation of the essence. The sword light spread out like a beautiful scroll, slowly unfolding. Thousands of mountains filled the air, overlapping each other, and vast rivers filled the air, reflecting the shadows of thousands of mountains. With just a glance, people couldn't help but feel intoxicated. The Maqian Society's expert was startled. His mind couldn't help but waver as if it was being pulled in. Immediately, he was incomparably shocked. What kind of sword move was this? It could actually affect his mind. One had to know that he had cultivated for more than 100 years and had experienced many hardships. His mind and willpower were incomparably firm, but he was actually affected by the opponent. Every shadow of a mountain and every ripple of water was formed by the sword light. When combined together, it was endless variations. This sword was created by Qinzong after he had absorbed the memories of the exploding sword elder. He had accumulated all his swordsmanship and combined it with the infinite transformations of the supreme sword sect. Thousands of mountains and rivers. One sword turned into 1,000 mountains and 10,000 rivers. Break. An intense sense of crisis filled the Skyscraper Society expert's heart. With an explosive roar, all of his hair stood on end. The 9 Earthstring vortexes madly spun, surpassing their limits and exploding with even greater power. Due to the secret art, Zhang Xian's strength had already increased by 50%. Now that he was pushing himself to his limits, his strength had increased by another 20%, bringing the total to 70%. He punched out, and a terrifying air current covered the surface of his fist. It was as if a meteor had fallen from the sky, bringing with it the power to destroy everything. This attack was even more powerful. With a boom, the mountains and rivers shook violently, as if the painting was about to be destroyed. 1,000 mountains and 10,000 rivers was a sword move that contained infinite changes. It could be said to be Qinzong's best work in terms of swordsmanship. However, in terms of power, it was slightly lacking. Zhang Xian's punch, on the other hand, was filled with pure power. It was extremely violent and overbearing. The power of the punch suddenly exploded, tearing apart the illusory image of the mountains and rivers. However, at the same time, the power of the punch was constantly decreasing. The shattered mountains and rivers immediately turned into strands of surging sword chi, which then fell on the Skyscraper Society expert's protective spiritual energy and broke through his protective spiritual energy and inner armor. Just as the sword chi was about to kill him, the Skyscraper Society expert's body suddenly swayed. He mysteriously escaped from the sword chi like a cicada shedding its carapace. Even so, the Skyscraper Society expert's body was covered with sword scars. Several strands of sword chi even broke through his skin. "You must die," the Skyscraper Society expert said angrily. Qinzong's strength was too shocking. It was hard to guarantee that he wouldn't continue to grow and make the Skyscraper Society expert tremble in fear. If he wanted to kill Zhang Xian, he had to kill him now. Then, the Skyscraper Society expert took out a fiery red elixir. The elixir exuded an astonishing aura, which was like boiling lava from a volcano. The Skyscraper Society expert swallowed the elixir. Boom, boom, boom. It was as if a volcano had erupted. Tyrannical power surged endlessly in his body. His skin quickly turned red, and a blazing aura spread out. It was as if his entire body had turned into a furnace, with raging flames surging. With every breath he took, a blazing aura seemed to gush out. This elixir was his trump card. Under most circumstances, he wouldn't use it. However, he had no choice but to use it now. An astonishing aura erupted. The ground couldn't withstand it and collapsed. Qinzong's expression suddenly changed. He took a deep breath. Since the Skyscraper Society expert had used all his means, he couldn't hold back anymore. Otherwise, he might be beaten to death. Suddenly, the Demon Slayer robe replaced his original robe. The ice demonic ring appeared on his left index finger. The heavenly will sword was sheathed, and the Starfire Spirit Sword was in his hand. Seeing Chunzong's outfit and weapon change in an instant, the Skyscraper Society expert was a little surprised and paid more attention. No matter what means you have, you must die today. With a roar, the Skyscraper Society expert clenched his fists. An astonishing, blazing aura gushed out, turning into flames covering his fists. Boom! 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 Every punch contained an incomparably scorching power, as if it could melt and shatter everything. It made Chunzong's hair stand on end. Fortunately, Chunzong was wearing the Demon Slayer robe, an upper-grade spiritual weapon. Its tyrannical power firmly protected his body. The blazing aura coming at him couldn't affect Chunzong at all. His left hand grasped the scabbard, and his right hand grasped the sword hilt. Instantly, he pulled out the sword. The Starfire Spirit Sword was unsheathed. It was like a blazing stream of light piercing through the air. Starfire Sky Strike. Under the minor explosion sword art, the Starfire Sky Strike was even more powerful. Coupled with the enhancement of the Starfire Spirit Sword, it was even more terrifying. The void shook. With a boom, the meteors were shattered one after another. The defensive power of the Demon Slayer robe and the inner armor was activated to the extreme by Chunzong. The power of the upper-grade spiritual weapon also firmly protected Chunzong. Coupled with Chunzong's tyrannical physique and protective spiritual power, the defensive power was even more amazing. Although the Skyscraper Society expert's attack was even more powerful, after more than half of its power was weakened, the remaining power couldn't threaten Chunzong. An upper-grade spiritual weapon. The Skyscraper Society expert couldn't help but gasp. Astonished, truly astonished. This guy had several upper-grade spiritual weapons, but he didn't have any. He had to kill him. These upper-grade spiritual weapons all belonged to him. Being greedy, the power of his attack seemed to be a bit stronger. Chunzong performed the Starfire Sword art with the Starfire Spirit Sword. Its power was even more terrifying. It directly attacked. After a long time, the power of the Tower of Ascension would weaken. After all, it was activated with one's own power. When one's own power was exhausted, the power of the Tower of Ascension would slowly fade away. Therefore, he had to finish this battle as soon as possible. However, this person was very strong. It was impossible to finish him off easily. Chunzong approached and activated all of his defensive power to withstand the opponent's attack. Then, the Cold Ice Demonic Ring appeared. The power of the upper-grade spiritual weapon Cold Ice Demonic Ring was amazing. As soon as it was activated by Chunzong, an amazing cold power immediately spread in all directions, suppressing the opponent's blazing aura. The Cold Ice Demonic Ring enlarged and flew directly to the opponent. After being upgraded to an upper-grade spiritual weapon, the Cold Ice Demonic Ring not only had its spirituality greatly increased, but its cold power had also become stronger and harder. This attack was completely out of the opponent's expectation. The Skyscraper Society expert was directly facing a double attack. The Cold Ice Demonic Ring belonged to Fein Yoxie, but it was very secretive. Not many people knew about it. It just so happened that this Skyscraper Society expert didn't know about it. Otherwise, he would have taken precautions. The Cold Ice Demonic Ring could not only trap the target, but also attack the target directly. Its power was amazing. Chunzong seized the opportunity and activated the Starfire Sky Strike. The Skyscraper Society expert was shocked by the Cold Ice Demonic Ring's full power attack. He immediately tried to defend himself. At the same time, the Starfire Sky Strike arrived. There was no time to dodge or defend against this sword. With a boom, the Skyscraper Society expert was sent flying, vomiting blood. Fast as Starfire. The second sword attack was extremely fast and powerful. It directly pierced the opponent's sword, and a terrible power spread out from the wound. The third sword attack, Starfire Sky Strike. With a boom, the opponent's head was directly hit and exploded. The headless body fell from the sky. The Cold Ice Demonic Ring turned in the air and drew a beautiful arc. It kept shrinking and finally entered Chunzong's Void Ring. The power of Chunzong's ascension to the heavens also quickly disappeared and retreated into the Heaven Ascension Tower. The power that belonged to Chunzong flowed out of the Heaven Ascension Tower, and there was not much left. Chunzong quickly took out some medicinal pills to recover his power. The devil-slaying device was also put into the Void Ring. He changed into a more ordinary robe and sheathed the Starfire Spirit Sword. Chunzong scanned with his spiritual sense and immediately covered the opponent's body. Then, he moved, and the opponent's Void Ring fell into his hand. However, the glove on the opponent's hand was damaged by the Starfire Spirit Sword, so it was worthless. After the Void Ring recognized him as its owner, Chunzong checked the Void Ring to see what was inside. This Void Ring was only of the low grade. It was the same size as Chunzong's original Void Ring, but there were many things inside. There were a lot of Spirit Source pills, many elixirs, and so on. Among these elixirs, Chunzong also found some Spirit Source pills and Earth Vein pills. Spirit Source pills and Earth Vein pills were not exclusive to the Ultimate Sky Society. The Skyscraper Society also had some. This person had a high status in the Skyscraper Society, so it was reasonable for him to have some Spirit Source pills and Earth Vein pills. However, to Chunzong's disappointment, there were not many of them. There were only 10 of each, and they were all of the middle grade. After all, there were too few upper-grade Spirit Source pills and Earth Vein pills. If it were not for Chunzong's talent and contributions, he would not have been able to get them. In addition to the Spirit Source pills and Earth Vein pills, there are dozens of Spirit Gold or in the Void Ring, which greatly enriched Chunzong's Spirit Gold mine. Chapter 934. Within his body, the three king whirlpools spun at an astonishing speed, as if they were enormous millstones of heaven and earth that could crush and obliterate everything. Intense rumbling sounds came from the three Earth Vein king whirlpools. The energy of the 10 mid-rank Spirit Source pills and 10 mid-rank Earth Vein pills was absorbed and refined at an astonishing speed. With the Lingwu as one, everything was pushed to the extreme, causing Chunzong's cultivation level to rise rapidly. When Chunzong had completely absorbed the energy of the 10 middle-grade Spirit Source pills and the 10 middle-grade Earth Vein pills, his cultivation base had once again risen. Late third-level Earth Spirit Realm. The increase in cultivation made Chunzong even happier. Body Crush. With a low shout, a palm shining with 9 dazzling starlight slammed down in the air. The air under the palm collapsed. Like a bubble being pressed, a vacuum palm print appeared. A terrifying shattering power condensed on the palm print and directly hit the body of an evil corpse. With a bang, the evil corpse's body flew out and shattered into pieces. However, the other 3 corpses still pounced forward, unafraid of death. Die! A low roar rang out as he tapped his finger 3 times. 3 cold star fingers shot through the air and pierced through the air. Pop, pop, pop. 3 crisp sounds rang out at the same time as the heads of the 3 corpses were pierced through. The powerful force also caused the 3 corpses to abruptly stop in their tracks and fall to the ground. The power of the cold star fingers then exploded within the heads of the corpses, blasting their skulls to smithereens. In the blink of an eye, the 4 strong corpses had all been killed. After doing all this, the expert from the 9-star Sky sect didn't even look at the 4 corpses, as if he was dusting off the dust on his hands. A trace of cold light flashed in his eyes as he swept his gaze towards a certain direction like lightning. Come out. I've already discovered you. There's no point in hiding. A trace of coldness suffused the expert's voice. However, there was no movement. The 9-star Sky sect expert stood in place without moving. His eyes were fixed on a wall that had yet to collapse a few thousand meters away. His intuition told him that there was someone there. However, after he spoke, no one appeared. He could not help but frown slightly. He immediately attacked and pointed his finger. His finger broke through the air. The starlight finger hit the broken wall. With a boom, the wall exploded. Dust and smoke billowed, but no one could be seen. Seems like we sensed wrongly, the expert from the 9-star Sky sect murmured. Then his hair stood on end. Behind him, a figure suddenly appeared. A beam of sword light containing terrifying power instantly pierced towards him. This sword strike shocked the 9-star sky sex expert. His entire body went cold and his back went numb. However, his cultivation was profound and powerful, and he had experienced countless life and death battles. His reaction was incomparably fast, and he reacted in an instant. Layers of power layered on his back, strengthening his defense to the extreme. Moreover, he took a step forward at an extremely fast speed. At the same time, the 9 dots of starlight flickered, bursting forth with incomparably astonishing power. They flew behind him, each of the starlight containing astonishing power, capable of piercing through everything. It had to be said that the 9-star sky sex expert's reaction was incomparably fast. His defense, evasion, and counterattack were in place in one step. However, Chunzong was not to be trifled with. Time and time again, facing powerful enemies, Chunzong was constantly honed, allowing Chunzong to become even stronger. After the sword light pierced through the air, he swung his long sword and immediately hit the 9 dots of starlight. After collapsing one after another, the sword light once again condensed into one. This time, it was even stronger and faster, piercing through the void like a spark. It was as urgent as a spark. However, this sword strike missed and only pierced through the opponent's afterimage. He turned around and attacked. The 9-star mystic spirit hand's body-shattering palm carried astonishing power as it blasted forward. An indescribable pressure spread throughout his body. Chunzong felt waves of pain coming from his body, as if he was about to be shattered. He had seen this person use this palm before, but it was not aimed at him, so he did not feel much. Now that he was facing it head-on, the feeling was very direct. However, Chunzong had already killed the expert from the Skyscraper Society and unexpectedly encountered this expert from the 9-star Sky Sect. His opponent's strength was similar to that of the Skyscraper Society's expert. Because of this, Chunzong took the initiative to attack. If he was an enemy, then he would kill him. The battle was extremely fierce. However, Chunzong did not directly take out the Starfire Spirit Sword and other weapons. Instead, he used the Heavenly Will Sword to fight. Although Chunzong knew that the power of the Tower of Ascension was limited and could not be maintained for too long, his opponent was strong and a strong enemy. It was a good opportunity for him to hone himself. Therefore, he first fought fiercely with his opponent to hone himself. When the time was right, he would unleash all his power to kill his opponent. This was not only to hone himself, but also to force his opponent to show his trump card first. Fight, fight, fight. Both sides were tyrannical and had astonishing destructive power. Chi blasts shot out in all directions as they collided, shattering everything around them. Cracks and craters were everywhere. Dust and smoke billowed. The 9-star Sky Sex expert wore starlight gloves. 9 starlight dots circled around his body. 9-star mystic spirit hand. Life reaping. A palm strike pierced through space. Life reaping. Under the fierce battle, he could not kill or even suppress his opponent. Like the expert from the Skyscraper Society, the 9-star Sky Sex expert also realized that Chunzong's growth was too fast. Therefore, he had to kill him. Otherwise, if he continued to grow, he would definitely surpass him. At that time, it would not be a matter of whether he wanted to deal with him, but whether he wanted to deal with him. 9-star life pointing technique. The 9 starlight dots circling around his body suddenly shone brightly. Then, the 9 starlight dots fell on his body. The 9 starlight dots were like imprints. A ray of starlight shot out from the first starlight dot and connected the 9 starlight dots, forming a starry sky pattern. Suddenly, a tyrannical aura surged out from the 9-star Sky Sex expert. The 9-star Mystic Spirit hand's power skyrocketed. Chunzong also activated the Miniature Explosion Sword art. The perfection stage of the Miniature Explosion Sword art increased Chunzong's sword power significantly. Frigid Star Finger. 9-star Mystic Spirit hand. Meteor Explosion. He used all kinds of martial arts at his fingertips. The 9-star Sky Sect was one of the top 15 forces on the Kanglan continent. They had existed for more than 10,000 years. They were powerful and had a deep foundation. No one knew how many martial arts they had collected. Among them, there were many Earth Spirit Realm martial arts. This 9-star Sky Sex expert had cultivated for 1 or 200 years. In order to substitute himself, he had practiced many Earth Spirit Realm martial arts. It's about time, Qinzong thought to himself. Up until now, his opponent had already displayed all of his moves. Perhaps he was still hiding something. However, Qinzong knew how long he had to use the Heaven Ascension Pagoda. It was time to go all out. The Demon Slayer was ready, but the Frost Demonic Ring did not appear. He was waiting for the best opportunity. The Starfire Spirit Sword was also in his hand. Unsheathing the Starfire Spirit Sword, Qinzong used it to display the Starfire Sword art. Its power greatly increased. High-grade spirit weapon. The 9-star Sky Sex expert had sharp senses. In addition, during the battle, Qinzong could not perfectly suppress the fluctuations of several high-grade spirit weapons. He immediately caught a trace of their aura. 1, 2, 3. The 9-star Sky Sex expert was shocked. The fluctuations of the inner armor, the long robe, and the sword in his hand. If he counted the sword from before, there were 4 high-grade spirit weapons. The 9-star Sky Sex expert only felt his heart tremble. For high-grade spirit weapons, how shocking this was. One had to know that even in a major force like the 9-star Sky Sect, even those powerful, profound Sky Realm experts could not take out 4 high-grade spirit weapons. For a moment, the 9-star Sky Sex expert's breathing quickened because he felt that if he killed his opponent, these 4 high-grade spirit weapons would be his. All right, these high-grade spirit weapons could not have been obtained in the 9th Spirit Gold Mine, right? In the 9th Spirit Gold Mine, his opponent had snatched the Void Ring from the tiger's mouth. Perhaps there were several high-grade spirit weapons in the Void Ring. When he thought of this, he became more and more certain, and a breath of resentment emerged from the bottom of his heart. Originally, the Void Ring should have belonged to him. His killing intent was even stronger. He used all his means just to kill Qinzong. In the fierce battle, after Qinzong blocked his opponent's fierce attack, he immediately activated the power of the Frost Demonic Ring. An extremely cold aura swept out with a bang, as if it was going to freeze his opponent. The sudden attack was completely out of his opponent's expectations. The 5th, high-grade spirit weapon, his entire mind seemed to be frozen, but he also understood that this was a battle of life and death, and there was no room for distraction. However, when Qinzong seized the opportunity to activate the power of the Frost Demonic Ring, the result was already clear. He dodged the Frost Demonic Ring's attack, but was also affected by the bone-chilling cold power. His chi and blood were sluggish, and his limbs were slightly numb and stiff. In a battle between experts, only a breath's time was needed. A breath's difference was enough to change the outcome and determine life and death. Urgent as a spark, the sword light was extremely fast, piercing through the sky with astonishing power. 1 sword, 2 swords, 3 swords. Immediately, the sword light spread out again, turning into thousands of mountains and rivers. It was like the most beautiful painting unfolding, enchanting people. The 5th sword, Starfire Sky Strike. With a boom, heaven and earth shook. The 9-star Sky Sect expert couldn't help but look down at his chest. There was a fist-sized hole that went straight through his chest and back, and the heart inside was completely shattered. A terrible blazing power crazily rushed from the hole to all parts of his body. His vitality was rapidly draining, and so was his strength. The 6th sword was just an ordinary sword slash, but it directly cut off his opponent's head. After doing all this, Qinzong stopped the power of Heaven Ascension, and his strength returned to his body. He didn't have much left, so he quickly took out pills to recover his consumed strength. At the same time, Qinzong also took his opponent's Void Ring. It was also a low-grade Void Ring, but there were many good things in it. There were pills, spirit herbs, and spirit sources. Qinzong even found a few mid-grade spirit weapons. However, these mid-grade spirit weapons were of no use to him. In addition, there were dozens of spirit gold oregano K. Qinzong couldn't help but smile. Chapter 9:35. Roar, roar, roar. Violent roars resounded through the heavens and earth, like the wrath of 10,000 beasts. It was the roars of a large group of evil corpses. In front of Qinzong, a large group of evil corpses pounced on him like mad dogs. Qinzong held his sword in one hand and looked forward calmly. Seeing the large group of evil corpses pouncing on him, suddenly, a sharp light flashed through his eyes like cold lightning. Although there were many evil corpses, Qinzong was not afraid. He swung his sword, and the sword light was extremely sharp. It was like a huge crescent moon breaking through the sky, as if it was going to split the heavens and earth. Slash! Strange sounds continued to ring out. The crescent moon sword light was like a hot knife cutting through butter, and the evil corpses' strong bodies were cut into pieces one after another. Qinzong noticed that there were many evil corpses in the spiritual gold secret realm, but under normal circumstances, the evil corpses in the outside world were weaker, while the evil corpses in some mines or palaces were more powerful. It made sense. Compared to the battles in the past, experts would fight in important places, and after death, they would gradually turn into evil corpses. In just a few moves, the group of evil corpses were all killed by Qinzong. At this moment, a vast and mighty aura resounded in the sky, resounding through the heavens and earth. Qinzong could not help but look up, and his expression changed slightly. The originally reddish-gray sky now looked a little darker. A wave of destruction gradually spread out from it, accompanied by a shocking aura that shook the heavens and earth. Suddenly, a gust of wind blew from nowhere. Countless streams of reddish-gray airflow swept across like a tidal wave, surging like a long river. Crack! In the reddish-gray air currents, a bolt of lightning with a deeper color broke through the air. The lightning was filled with an extremely terrifying aura, as if it was going to destroy everything and turn them into nothingness. The second bolt of lightning, the third bolt of lightning, more and more lightning bolts appeared and interweaved in the sky, emitting a frightening aura. Qinzong's face was solemn. He could not withstand any of those bolts of lightning, even if he activated the power of the Heaven Ascension Pagoda. The changes in the sky attracted everyone's attention. All of them temporarily put aside their other matters and focused on the sky. As the changes became more and more intense, everyone began to feel a power rejecting them. The power was slowly increasing, making them feel that if they did not leave this place, they would be crushed by this terrifying rejection power. The spirit gold secret territory is about to close, Qinzong thought to himself. The same thought also appeared in everyone's mind. It had been more than 2 months since they had entered the spirit gold secret realm. This meant that the opening time of the spirit gold secret realm was getting shorter and shorter. Qinzong immediately dashed toward the entrance of the spirit gold secret realm. Now that Qinzong's cultivation had reached the peak of the 3rd level of the Earth spirit realm, his speed was much faster when he deployed his movement technique. One by one, figures rushed out of the mine or from the dilapidated palace and flew towards the entrance of the mystic realm. That was both the entrance and the exit. Since he could feel the gradually increasing repulsive force, if he didn't leave now, he might not be able to. No one knew what would happen if the spirit gold secret realm was closed, and if the living were still inside, what would happen to them? Even if he could survive, his cultivation wouldn't be able to increase at all in this place that lacked the spirit energy of heaven and earth. Instead, it would continuously drop. Everyone was fully focused on their journey. Gradually, they saw the entrance. After all, some were faster, some were slower, and some were closer to the entrance. As they approached the entrance, they rushed in without hesitation. Their bodies seemed to have been swallowed up and disappeared. Qinzong also came to the entrance and directly rushed in. He felt like he was entering water, and there was a strong resistance. His body kept moving forward, and he couldn't control it. After rushing out, Qinzong felt many gazes fall on him. "Come here." A large hand suddenly appeared and grabbed at the air, grabbing at Qinzong with a terrifying pressure. As the large hand suddenly appeared, a terrifying pressure enveloped Qinzong's body, making him unable to move. His body flew uncontrollably toward the large hand. It was a late-stage profound sky realm expert from the Skyscraper Society. "Don't you dare!" Elder Lu was furious. He also attacked. He straightened his palm like a knife and chopped at the sky. Blade light flashed, as if it could split heaven and earth. It directly chopped the large hand formed by the opponent. In an instant, Chunzong broke free from the pressure of the large hand and rushed toward the extreme sky group with all his strength. The expert from the Skyscraper Society attacked unexpectedly, but since he had been interrupted, he couldn't succeed. Chunzong reacted quickly and landed in the extreme sky group's camp. Time flew. The Spirit Gold Secret Realm's entrance began to shake. Countless ripples surged on the surface of the door, emitting an even more terrifying aura. At this moment, a figure rushed out of the door. However, when he was halfway out, he stopped and his face was filled with panic. "Help me." He only had time to shout before the Elder of the Nine-Star Sky Sect reached out and grabbed him. Just as he was about to help him rush out, blood splashed in the air. Only half of his body had escaped from the Spirit Gold Secret Realm's entrance. The other half was nowhere to be seen. The Earth Spirit Realm expert from the Nine-Star Sky Sect didn't die directly. After all, Transcendents were incomparably tenacious. However, this tenacity only meant that they had to endure more pain and suffering. His screams and cries made people's hearts tremble. One of the elders from the Nine-Star Sky Sect sighed slightly and immediately attacked. He pointed his finger and pierced through the space between the eyebrows of the other half of the body, freeing him. "Let's go," the Elder of the Nine-Star Sky Sect said. The group entered the flying boat and flew away. As soon as the people of the Nine-Star Sky Sect left, the other three sects in the Nine-Star Continent also left. Then, the Spirit Gold Secret Realm's entrance closed and disappeared, as if it had never appeared. "Where's Fein Yoxie?" "He didn't come out. Did any of you see him?" Fein Yoxie was one of the disciples of the Skyscraper Association's leader. He was talented and had great potential. Although he was only at the Earth's Spirit Realm, his status in the Extreme Heaven Association was quite high. Did he die in the Secret Realm? Although death was inevitable after entering the Spirit Gold Secret Realm, Fein Yoxie couldn't die. Otherwise, no one would dare to bear the wrath of the association's leader. Pressure and killing intent spread out from the people of the Skyscraper Association, filling the surroundings with an inexplicable sense of panic. "Let's go." The people of the Sky Pole Sword Sect and the Boundless Sword Sect also left. Then, the people of the three sword families left one after another, leaving only the Skyscraper Association and the Extreme Heaven Association. The Extreme Heaven Association also wanted to leave, but they were stopped. "I advise you to obediently hand over all the Spirit Gold mines you obtained in the Spirit Gold Secret Realm." An elder of the Skyscraper Association sneered, his tone full of threat. He transferred the pressure brought by Fein Yoxie's death to the Extreme Heaven Association. "Then let's try." Elder Lu's temper was the most explosive. As he spoke, a tyrannical aura burst out from his body. Elder Su, Elder Wang, and the other profound heaven experts also burst out with tyrannical auras. Boom, boom, boom. The tyrannical auras burst out from the bodies of the Skyscraper Association's experts like a volcanic eruption, soaring to the sky. The number of experts of the Skyscraper Association and the Extreme Heaven Association was about the same. Under the eruption of their terrifying auras, they constantly attacked each other, like invisible waves crashing against each other. Strong chi overflowed, the wind roared, and the clouds surged. Chunzong also gathered his strength, ready to activate the Sky Tower's power at the critical moment. Of course, even if he activated the Sky Tower's power, Chunzong knew that he wasn't a match for the profound heaven experts. After all, the gap between them was too big. Elder Su, Elder Wang, and Elder Lu also firmly protected Chunzong behind them, preventing Chunzong from being attacked. "I advise you to hand over the Spirit Gold mines. Otherwise, you will all die here." The elder of the Skyscraper Association threatened again. "Don't talk nonsense here," Elder Su retorted. In fact, everyone could see that the two sides were evenly matched. If they really fought, the Extreme Heaven Association would certainly suffer great losses, but the Skyscraper Association would also suffer great losses. It could be said that both sides would suffer great losses. Therefore, the Skyscraper Association didn't really want to fight, and the Extreme Heaven Association didn't want to fight either, at least under such circumstances. In the Spirit Gold secret territory, both sides had lost less than half of their people. Those who came out alive must have Spirit Gold mines. The only difference was the quantity. Now, the most important thing was to go back and let everyone take out the Spirit Gold mines to refine the Spirit Gold. Both sides released their terrifying auras, constantly clashing against each other, but neither side attacked directly. The Extreme Heaven Association didn't want to attack, while the Skyscraper Association suppressed themselves. Suddenly, a tyrannical aura seemed to descend from the sky. It was like a mountain, but also like a raging sea, majestic and boundless, and filled with earth-shaking madness. Maniac. The faces of the Extreme Heaven Association's people changed. This kind of aura was very obvious, like a label. As soon as it appeared, it reminded people of the other's identity. The second strongest of the Skyscraper Association. Maniac. Hearing the name Maniac, Chunzong's body involuntarily trembled. It wasn't from fear, but from anger and killing intent. Elder Tang Yaoha had died to Maniac's blade. With Elder Tang Yaoha's strength, even if he wasn't a match for Maniac, if he wanted to escape, Maniac might not be able to kill him. The reason he was killed was because Elder Tang Yaoha wanted to protect everyone, including himself. In other words, Elder Tang Yaoha was killed because of him. Chunzong swore that when he was strong enough, he would definitely kill Maniac as a sacrifice to Elder Tang Yaoha. While angry, Chunzong couldn't help but worry. No matter how much he hated Maniac, there was no denying that he was very strong. Even the second strongest of the Extreme Heaven Association, Sword's Sovereign Azure Dragon, was inferior. Maniac's arrival would break the stalemate, and the Extreme Heaven Association's losses would be great. A domineering figure with an incomparably terrifying aura descended, like a meteor that could destroy the earth. His aura was overbearing and incomparably violent. The air below was suppressed like a formless mountain, making it difficult for everyone to breathe. Very strong. Chapter 936. Rumble. Thousands of meters away, Maniac grinned. The craziness on his face became more obvious. His eyes were wide open, and cold killing intent was flowing in his eyes. Then, Maniac was slightly startled because he saw a figure in the Extreme Sky Association's camp. It was the person he had wanted to kill before. His killing intent sword. Today is the day you die. A shocking voice exploded in the sky. Maniac suddenly grasped the hilt of the saber on his back. He unsheathed the wild saber, and a shocking power poured into it. The saber emitted a blazing light. Thousands of meters in the sky, it seemed as if a scorching sun had risen. It was extremely dazzling, and its aura was extremely violent. A strong sense of crisis filled everyone's body. Slash! Then, the huge scorching sun fell from the sky with an earth-shattering rumble. This is bad. The faces of the Extreme Sky Association's people changed dramatically. Meanwhile, the Skyscraper Association's people attacked at the same time. Their purpose was to pin down the Extreme Sky Association's people and make it difficult for them to resist the attack of the scorching sun. One had to admit that the Skyscraper Association's people cooperated very well. If the Extreme Sky Association's experts tried to resist the attack of the scorching sun, they would be injured or even killed by the Skyscraper Association's attacks, and vice versa. Shinzong's hair stood on end because an extremely terrifying aura had locked onto him. It was so violent and overbearing that he felt like he would be crushed even though he was far away. Shinzong even felt that Maniac's main target was him. Last time, he had failed to kill Shinzong, and now that he had seen Shinzong again, Shinzong felt that his guess had been correct. The Mad Ghost's main target was Chunzong, and everyone else was just collateral damage. The scorching sun saber fell from the sky. The power of this attack had reached the limit of the profound sky realm. It was extremely terrifying and could be called the strongest attack under the titled Monarch realm. Maniac, you've stretched your hand too far. A clear voice rang out, accompanied by a series of increasingly high-pitched dragon roars. An azure dragon flew through the air. The azure dragon was 100 meters long and looked very lifelike. It bared its fangs and brandished its claws as it flew through the air. Its mighty aura filled the air. Its sword, Sovereign Azure Dragon. Sword Sovereign is here. The members of the Polar Sky Association were overjoyed. Originally, the Skyscraper Association and the Skyscraper Association were evenly matched. However, the appearance of the maniac had broken this balance. The situation was beginning to turn against the Skyscraper Association. Everyone was shocked and prepared to cut off their losses. And now, the Azure Dragon Swordmaster had come and made a move. Even though Sword Sovereign Azure Dragon was one rank lower than Maniac on the famed sword ranking, and there was a difference in strength, this difference was not very big. If it was a life and death battle, Sword Sovereign Azure Dragon would die in battle, and Maniac would not gain any advantage. He would definitely be fatally wounded. The Blazing Sun's attack was incredibly powerful, and when it descended, it was unknown how much damage it would cause. The 100-meter-long Azure Dragon tore through the air and opened its mouth to bite at the Blazing Sun. It was as if the Azure Dragon was biting a pearl. With a bang, the Azure Dragon's head was shattered. The Blazing Sun's attack was too powerful, but even with its head shattered, the Azure Dragon continued to charge forward, and the aftershock shattered the Blazing Sun's attack. With a boom, a violent explosion exploded in the sky. Scarlet and green energy flowed like the water of the sea, rushing in all directions as if it was going to destroy everything. The experts of the Skyscraper Association and the Polar Sky Association, who had already begun to fight, retreated one after another. The impact of the explosion in the sky was too frightening and difficult to resist. Azure Insect, you're courting death. Maniac raged. Last time, he was about to kill the geniuses of the Polar Sky Association, but he was stopped by Sword Sovereign Azure Dragon. This time, it was Sword Sovereign Azure Dragon again. Azure Insect was naturally not Sword Sovereign Azure Dragon's name, nor was it a form of address. It was a form of contempt and insult used by Maniac. Come and kill me if you have the ability. Sword Sovereign Azure Dragon smiled. He wasn't angered by the insulting form of address. At his level, a mere form of address couldn't affect him in the slightest. That was because Sword Sovereign Azure Dragon was very clear on one point. No matter what, strength was the key to everything. If he was stronger than Maniac, then Maniac wouldn't dare call him that. Amidst the violent explosion, the two figures weren't affected at all, and they rapidly approached each other. Maniac held a huge berserk blade that was burning with incomparably scorching flames. The flames emitted an extremely shocking aura, as if they could burn everything. Sword Sovereign Azure Dragon held his sword, and azure sword light rippled like water. On the sword, there was a dragon-shaped phantom that endlessly swam, giving people a feeling of extreme agility. Shinzong raised his head and stared. Through the chaotic azure and red currents, he could vaguely see two figures. However, the two figures were very blurry, and he couldn't see their movements at all. Because their speed was too fast, he could only see the extremely terrifying sharp sounds that resounded through the world. Below, the Skyscraper Association and Polar Sky Association didn't attack again. They were facing each other from a distance. The key to victory was between Maniac and Sword Sovereign Azure Dragon. Maniac held his berserk blade with both hands and madly slashed out. Every slash was free of unnecessary changes and only pursued the ultimate destruction. Each slash seemed capable of splitting mountains and splitting heaven and earth. Maniac's blade art displayed power and destruction incisively and vividly. Sword Lord Azure Dragon's sword was incomparably nimble. Facing the mad ghost's ferocious slash, with a sword in hand, his body moved with the sword. With an astonishing speed and exquisite technique, he neutralized the mad ghost slash. Berserk slash. An incomparably blazing aura soared into the sky. It was violent, overbearing, and incomparably vigorous. At the same time, a tyrannical power pressed down from all directions, suppressing Sword Sovereign Azure Dragon and restricting his body. The cultivation of profound sky realm experts was closely related to the power of the sky veins. The fact that they could fly was a manifestation of the power of the sky veins. When one's control of the power of the sky veins reached a certain level, they could mobilize the power of the sky veins in a small area to suppress others and restrict their body movements. The pressure from all directions immediately made Sword's Sovereign Azure Dragon's expression change. This kind of pressure was a bit stronger than before, which meant that Maniac had improved a lot during this period of time. On the contrary, Sword's Sovereign Azure Dragon was cultivating very hard, but he didn't make any progress. It wasn't that Sword's Sovereign Azure Dragon was incapable. In fact, Sword's Sovereign Azure Dragon's talent was also very good. However, his cultivation base had reached the peak of the 9th level of the Profound Sky Realm. In terms of cultivation base, there was nothing that could be improved. The only thing that could be improved was the control of the power of the sky veins. The so-called monarch experts were experts who had mastered the power of the sky veins to a certain level and could use the power of the sky veins to kill their enemies. It was very difficult, as they were fighting against the heaven and earth for the right to control the power of the sky veins. Only by obtaining the right to control the power of the sky veins could one become a monarch. No matter if it was Maniac or Sword's Sovereign Azure Dragon, they were both walking on the path of becoming a monarch. However, this path was very difficult. Every time they improved, it would take a long time to accumulate. Whether they could become a monarch in the end was still unknown. Now, Maniac had improved a lot. His strength had surpassed Sword's Sovereign Azure Dragon by a bit. Sword's Sovereign Azure Dragon was almost certain that Maniac was only one step away from becoming a monarch. As long as he pierced through that paper, Maniac would be able to become a monarch. At that time, the Skyscraping Society would have 2 monarch experts, which would be even more terrifying. Of course, it was uncertain whether Maniac could become a monarch or not. Since ancient times, countless experts at the peak of the Profound Sky Realm were only one step away from becoming a monarch, but in the end, they couldn't make the breakthrough. There were also a few who had comprehended the power of the sky veins by chance and became a monarch expert. Therefore, whether one could become a monarch or not didn't have much to do with one's talent. Some people also became a monarch in a daze. Sword's Sovereign Azure Dragon felt that his body was being restrained. While he was gathering his strength to resist the power of the sky veins, Maniac's terrifying blade had already slashed down. Fury Chop. It was a very common name. It sounded like a common martial art, but in fact, it was one of the essences of Maniac's blade techniques. It was a blade technique that used his astonishing anger to gather all his strength and finally release it. It abandoned all complicated changes and only pursued the ultimate killing and destruction. The stronger the anger, the stronger the power of the Fury Chop. With a boom, Sword's Sovereign Azure Dragon couldn't dodge. He could only take it head-on. His body and sword merged into one, turning into a huge dragon head and attacking. The moment the blade light shattered, the Cyan Dragon head also collapsed into nothingness. The terrifying power directly impacted, causing Sword's Sovereign Azure Dragon's chi and blood to surge. His entire body fell from the sky uncontrollably. His body fell like a falling star, smashing towards the Extreme Sky Society's camp. Maniac didn't stop. He slashed down again. The terrifying blade light was earth-shattering. He wanted to take this opportunity to eliminate his old rival, Sword's Sovereign Azure Dragon. Even if he couldn't kill him, he wanted to injure him severely. The Extreme Sky Society was able to contend with the Skyscraper Association without being destroyed. Apart from being secretive enough, it was also because there were many experts in it. The Extreme Sky Society's leader was one of them, and Sword's Sovereign Azure Dragon was another. The death of any one of them would be a great loss to the Extreme Sky Society. The third blade slashed down. Maniac continued to slash out. Each slash was incomparably terrifying. The blazing and violent blade light made people despair. Sword's Sovereign Azure Dragon forcefully raised his chi. His figure paused in midair and slashed out. The Cyan Sword light was like a surging tide, surging in the sky. But under the terrifying blade light, the Cyan Sword light was constantly torn apart. Sword's Sovereign Azure Dragon's face turned solemn. There was a trace of blood at the corner of his mouth. Maniac's Fury Chop had slightly injured him. This kind of injury was actually not serious. It wouldn't be a big deal under normal circumstances. But in a battle between experts, any advantage or disadvantage would be grasped and expanded. It would then affect the outcome of the battle. Maniac's power seemed to be endless. His continuous slashes brought a lot of pressure to Sword Sovereign Azure Dragon. He could only defend for a while and couldn't counterattack. Open. With a low shout, Sword Sovereign Azure Dragon seized the opportunity and slashed out. This sword was so shocking that it seemed to be able to break the sky. It shattered the layers of blade light and counterattacked. But Maniac's reaction was very fast. He slashed down again, shattering the sword light and descending from the sky. The terrifying aura caused everyone below to be horrified. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.